Chapter 489. Fang Xingjian's eyes narrowed abruptly into slits, and it was as if there were countless sword light seething within them. His heaven's perception was unleashed to an extreme, absorbing all the light and sound waves incessantly as he analyzed the locations, directions, and speeds of all the wind and thunderbolts. Then the third sword of the four god-slaying swords, Light Pursuit, was activated. This sword attack, which pursued extreme speed, was suddenly activated. In Fang Xingjian's eyes, the entire world seemed to have slowed down to the point where it seemed as if it had come to a standstill. The densely packed wind and thunderbolts in the sky seemed to have come to a standstill in midair. Each of their gaps and weak points became clear to Fang Xingjian. Then a stream of sword light flashed and appeared amidst the first descending wind and thunderbolt, followed by the second, third, and fourth. The densely packed sword light was like a myriad of swords piercing through the stars, piercing straight into the wind and thunderbolt. Then it was the second, third, and fourth. The Light Pursuit was activated at full power, and with a single thought, over 1 million streams of sword ripples swept across the sky, completely shattering each and every single one of the wind and thunderbolts. In the space that seemed to have come to a standstill, all the wind and thunderbolts swelled up slightly. In the next few seconds, they would completely explode in the sky, blasting a huge hole in Demonic City's atmospheric layer. Fang Xingjian's gaze once again turned toward Li Shuanghua. At the next moment, several 100,000 streams of sword ripples gushed out in 1,000th of a second. Right now, Li Shuanghua's actual body was not present. She had only left a portion of her power and consciousness in Fang Xingjian's body. Previously, she had still been able to fend off Fang Xingjian's ordinary slashes. However, right now, each of the physical particles on Fang Xingjian's body was slashed consecutively by over several tens of sword ripples. With such a high density and high frequency of attacks, even the portion of power she had left behind was unable to fend them off. Kacha, 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 kacha. In almost 100th of a second, Fang Yueming's body was slashed several 10 million times. At the next moment, the green light, which had been surging up all over his body, shattered completely, and he was slashed up into a bloody mess, almost turning into a pile of meat paste. However, Li Shuanghua was a divine-level expert after all. It was already Fang Xingjian's limit for him to be able to attack for 100th of a second. Almost at the instant when Fang Yueming's body was on the verge of death from serious injuries, 100th of a second had passed, and Li Shuanghua finally reacted. She was encompassed by layers and layers of stacking green light. Then, as if pushed by an endless atmosphere, she paused for a moment and disappeared into the horizon. In order to protect her son's physical body, Li Shuanghua controlled the atmosphere and sent Fang Yueming away. Only a voice filled with killing intent and endless killing intent lingered in midair. However, after receiving such an attack, even if Fang Yueming managed to survive, he would already be a cripple. Valspawn, my actual body isn't around today, so I'll spare your life for now. The next time we meet, I'll definitely suppress you personally, lest you continue to live and embarrass the Fang clan. Simultaneously, a beam of green light flashed explosively and struck Fang Xingjian's body at light speed, stopping him from pursuing Fang Yueming. When Fang Xingjian instantly destroyed the green light with several 100,000 sword ripples, Fang Yueming's silhouette could no longer be seen in the sky. He had already escaped several 100 kilometers away and disappeared. At the sight of this scene, everyone was stunned. To think that Li Shuanghua, who had just suppressed Fang Xingjian completely earlier, had escaped, everyone seemed to find it hard to accept this scene. It was only when Fang Xingjian appeared in void space and his domineering sword intent swept out, sweeping onto everyone's bodies, that someone finally reacted. With a smacking sound, the remaining members of the Fang clan dropped to their knees one after another, as if they could not withstand the pressure from Fang Xingjian's sword intent. Fang Can looked at Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky, with a horrified expression. To think that he was able to force a divine-level expert's consciousness away. How terrifying was his battle prowess? Third Ant also looked in disbelief in the direction in which Fang Yueming had disappeared. She mumbled, "How is this possible? How could this be? To think that this little b** starred managed to force Mother's power away?" But as soon as she finished speaking, she felt a sharp pain on her face, accompanied by a huge force that exploded on her face. Her entire body spun and flew out with a boom, directly smashing through a dozen small buildings and finally falling into a pile of ruins. "Who hit me?" Third Ant got to her feet after much difficulty, but she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. There were even a few teeth in the blood. She lifted her head furiously and saw that Fang Xingjian was standing before her. Fang Xingjian was looking at her with a pair of indifferent eyes, and streams of sword intent circled around her body. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her. "If I say another word of nonsense, he'll really kill me." Third Aunt Hua Mimi's body trembled as she said, I'm a member of the Hua clan. You've already offended Li Shuanghua. If you kill me, our Hua clan won't let you off either." Fang Xingjian looked at her coldly, as if he was looking at a piece of pork on a chopping board. "I hate you because you spoke rudely. I won't kill you because your crime doesn't warrant death. It has nothing to do with the Hua clan or whatever. However, you've helped Fang Yueming to set up the anti-ether formation, so I can't just let this slide." At the next moment, Hua Mimi let out an agonizing cry and fell to the ground. She felt as if something sharp had exploded in her head. Fang Xingjian had tapped on her cerebellum with the infiltrating void sword technique. From now on, her four limbs would no longer be able to coordinate perfectly the powers in her body. She would be unable to cultivate martial arts for the rest of her life, and could only be immortal. Turning his head, Fang Xingjian looked toward the Fang clan's elders who had participated in the battle and said coldly, "From today onward, I'm the head of the Fang clan. Do you have anything to say?" Everyone exchanged glances. Although Fang Xingjian had managed to push Li Shuanghua back once, he was after all just a clone of hers. If he wanted them to surrender completely, they would definitely be afraid of what Li Shuanghua would do to them in the future. However, Fang Xingjian was right before them. If they did not agree to his request, they would be afraid that they would be killed by Fang Xingjian with a single sword attack. Just as everyone was in a dilemma, second Uncle Fang Yueha stepped forward and said, "Xingjian, with your current abilities and sword arts, I have no objections to you becoming the clan's head. Before the victor between you and our mother is decided, we'll help you manage the clan for now." The meaning of this was very clear. It meant that before the victor between Fang Xingjian and Li Shuanghua was decided, they would help Fang Xingjian to manage the clan. However, once Li Shuanghua defeated Fang Xingjian, they would continue to be loyal to Li Shuanghua. In any case, they would listen to whoever won. However, even so, they would still be held accountable by Li Shuanghua after this. For Fang Yueha to be the first to say this, it was clear that he was also very hurt by his mother's unfairness. The others appeared to be in a difficult position. However, sensing the increasingly strong killing intent coming from Fang Xingjian, they could only nod helplessly. Fang Xingjian also knew that it was impossible for them to submit to Li Shuanghua wholeheartedly before a divine-level expert like her had been defeated. Therefore, he nodded slightly and said, "Help me spread the word that from today onward, I'm the Fang clan's clan head. Li Shuanghua has been going against the rules and acting in a domineering manner all these years. She's no longer fit to continue being the clan head. All the Fang clan's influences in Demonic City are to come here and pledge their loyalty to me within 3 hours. Otherwise, they'll be seen as traitors to the clan, just like Li Shuanghua." Fang Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly. He had not expected that for the sake of his third son, Li Shuanghua would be able to disregard her reputation as a divine-level expert and retreat directly. Right now, what he was most worried about was that Fang Xingjian would be completely shameless and not come looking for him. For the sake of the divine remains equipment, Fang Xingjian would have to hold it in and secretly forge the divine remains equipment. If that were the case, there would be too few means that he could use. This was why he had made these arrangements. He thought to himself, "I don't believe that I won't be able to force you out even with these arrangements." Everyone nodded bitterly in agreement, knowing that a great storm was about to be born in Demonic City. This was the truth. With the acceleration of the internet in modern society, in less than half an hour, the news of Fang Xingjian defeating Li Shuanghua's clone had already spread throughout the entire Demonic City and then to all the great influences on Earth. Of course, only the various powerful clans, influences, and experts knew of this news. To ordinary people, they only knew that there had been a gas explosion in Demonic City. How could they possibly know about the fight between experts and the Fang clan being split up? As Fang Xingjian's words were made known to many influences, more and more people rushed to Demonic City, anticipating that a great show was about to take place. Chapter 490. At the top of a 200-story building, in the most luxurious suite in the entire Demonic City, Fang Xingjian looked at the flashing lights of Demonic City under his feet. Various sword intents were still seething in his mind. Behind him, Tyrant was lying lazily on the sofa. His eyes were half closed, as if he was dozing off. Fang Xingjian threw him a glance and said, "Why have you been getting more and more lazy recently? The cultivation of the martial will is like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't advance, you'll fall behind. If you continue to be lazy, you will probably become weaker and weaker." Tyrant opened his eyes and said lazily, "I've been training in seclusion with you guys and have come up with a clear plan for the future. I feel that things like black magic are not prepared for us humans. Just by relying on black magic, one can only increase one's battle prowess, but it's very difficult to increase one's realm. It's more like an attack technique prepared for living creatures that are already very powerful to begin with. Therefore, in order to attain a breakthrough to the divine level, one must combine the methods of tempering one's will and physical body with that of knights." Fang Xingjian nodded. "That's right. It's the same for magic prince and black magic. Drawing on the knight's cultivation methods will be of great help to you in attaining a breakthrough to the divine level. This time around, when you were fighting against the many experts from the Fang clan, I saw that you were already able to use your physical body and will well. You also showed signs of advancing into martial arts and training your fist intents. When Tyrant was fighting against the many experts from the Fang clan, each of his punches and kicks was not only extremely violent, but there was also a concept of shattering the world and the furious roars of huge beasts. It was just that this fist intent was still blurry and had yet to be truly nurtured." "That's right. Yes, but after watching you and Li Shuanghua fight, my comprehension deepened a level," Tyrant said. "You are advancing bravely and advancing forward with an indomitable will because you have the support of extraordinary talent. I don't have your talent. If I were to continue charging forward without knowing when to advance or retreat, there would probably come a day when I would be incinerated like a meteor. Therefore, while I'm progressing, I need to rest. I need to be fierce and domineering in battle, like a demonic god from hell. But I need to be joyful and nurture my spirit during normal times." Tyrant smiled as he spoke, and the lazy aura he exuded became even stronger. It was as if a huge beast was lying down, rolling and yawning, slowly nurturing its strength. Alternating tension and relaxation is the way of cultivation. I can't learn your inhuman cultivation method. If I keep straining myself so hard, I'll collapse. I can only change to another method." Fang Xingjian did not say anything. Thinking that he only had 3 years left to live, he nodded slowly. "This is also a method. It's good that you found the method." Tyrant looked at Fang Xingjian and said, "What about you?" Fang Xingjian said, "Fang Xingjian Fang Qian Fang 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 Qian Fang Fang of after fighting with Li Shuanghua's doppelganger. You should have comprehended more than me, right? I've gained a little." Fang Xingjian lifted his head and looked at the stars in the night sky. He said, "The willpower of a divine-level expert is even more powerful than I imagined. I'll still need some time to complete the real 5th sword." It was because Fang Xingjian had yet to perform the 5th sword on his own that the 4 god-slaying swords were still called the 4 god-slaying swords. However, what Fang Xingjian did not mention was that although he was unable to perform it himself, Once he activated the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent, he would be able to perform the fifth sword. This was also the trump card that Fang Xingjian had prepared for Li Shuanghua's actual body. Just then, knocks rang out on the door, and second Uncle Fang Yuehe walked in. He looked at Fang Xingjian, who had his back facing him, with a complicated gaze, and said, "Xingjian, time's up. There are still 7 people who have yet to arrive." With that, he placed a stack of documents on the table. Fang Xingjian had already scanned through the documents with his heaven's perception. All of them were the presidents of the various companies that belonged to the Fang clan, the commanding officers of strongholds, or the leaders of the special forces. There was a total of 7 people, and all of them were the core powers of the Fang clan. They took up 80% of the Fang clan's manpower and wealth. However, none of them had come to meet him and pledge their loyalty to him within the stipulated time. This was within Fang Xingjian's expectations. "All right, then let's go," Fang Xingjian said to Tyrant. 4 for me and 3 for you. Bring all of them over. Bring all of them over and let them retire here, Fang Xingjian thought calmly. Many people had guessed that Li Shuanghua would immediately rush over with her actual body to suppress Fang Xingjian, the clan's traitor. Unexpectedly, Li Shuanghua did not appear at all. Seeing that things were progressing in a direction that he did not wish for, the killing intent in Fang Xingjian's heart grew increasingly stronger. He had already decided that even if he had to turn the world upside down, he would definitely force Li Shuanghua out. However, just as they were planning to set off, second Uncle Fang Yuehe's cell phone rang. After picking up the call, his countenance changed immediately. He turned to Fang Xingjian and said, "Xingjian, the Federation's representative is here." Before he finished his words, the door to the room was pushed open. A cold-looking lady with short hair, high heels, and a military uniform short skirt walked in. Her high heels made clicking sounds as she walked up to Fang Xingjian as if there was no one around. "Mr. Fang, hello. I'm Gao Lan from the Earth Federation's Planetary Defense. I'm representing the Federation to order you to immediately stop all activities that you're doing in Demonic City." Fang Xingjian frowned and said, "Earth's Federation?" The so-called Earth Federation was a super organization formed by the union of the 5 most powerful countries on Earth, as well as the 5 major families. It represented the most powerful forces in every field on Earth. That's right. The upper echelons of the Federation and the leaders of the various countries are very dissatisfied with everything that you've done in Demonic City recently, Mr. Fang. We hope that you can immediately stop these violent and barbaric actions. Otherwise, we can only forcefully interfere. Hearing what the other party said, Fang Xingjian said calmly, "Based on what I know, Li Shuanghua is one of the 10 permanent council members of the Earth Federation, right? Did she ask you guys to stop me?" The woman smiled and said, "Whether it is or not, I hope you can be more rational, Mr. Fang. Don't be blinded by anger. The Federation's influence is so great that it covers the entire Earth. Making an enemy of the Federation is making an enemy of the entire Earth. I hope you can consider it carefully before answering. Don't be rash and make a choice that you will regret for the rest of your life." Fang Xingjian said calmly, "Li Shuanghua thinks that I won't be able to withstand the pressure from the Federation and will quietly wait for her to return, right? Or does she think that there's no need for her actual body to rush back and that she can rely on the Federation's power to suppress me?" The female military officer smiled. Although she appeared polite, she could not hide the arrogance in her eyes. Isn't that the case? Chapter 491. As a member of the Earth's Federation, the female military officer knew very well how great the power the Earth's Federation possessed. As an organization jointly established by the 5 great clans and the 5 great countries, they had continuously gathered the 5 strongest humans on Earth, the 5 divine-level experts, as well as 80% of the countries, companies, enterprises, and influences on Earth. Under this terrifying power, no matter who or what it was, they would be unable to put up any resistance. If they dared to resist, they would be crushed into dust by the endless power. Furthermore, The increasing influence of the divine-level experts over the past few years had allowed the Federation's influence to expand rapidly, truly becoming the strongest influence on Earth. This was not the first time she had seen experts, leaders, and dictators turn into trembling little lambs when faced with the Federation. Therefore, she smiled quietly, as if waiting for Feng Xingjian's fear and anxiety. However, Feng Xingjian's reaction was completely out of her expectations. He appeared very calm, showing neither anger nor fear. Instead, he asked curiously, "Have you guys never thought that I can choose not to listen to what you guys have to say?" Huh? The female military officer could not react in time. However, Feng Xingjian shook his head. "You guys have stayed in a comfortable environment for too long, thinking that power, rules, and society are everything. Have you never thought that when a subversive force appears, the power, wealth, and influence that you guys usually rely on will all be meaningless?" Feng Xingjian understood that Earth was different from Miracle World after all. The social rules and ways of thinking that had been nurtured for several thousand or centuries were not something that could be changed with just over 10 years or a few experts. Moreover, Earth's military forces also possessed all sorts of high-tech equipment, and the density of ether particles and diabolic energy here was very low. Therefore, the people here were not like Miracle World, who worshipped the strong so blatantly. The people here were more used to using politics, wealth, influence, and military forces to solve problems. Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, the female military officer smiled in a mocking manner. She looked at Feng Xingjian as if she was looking at a fool. "Do you think that you're that subversive force?" Feng Xingjian did not reply. The reason why he dared to come to Demonic City and fight against the divine-level powerhouse was naturally because he had his own judgment. The diabolic energy on Earth had weakened. In addition to the fact that Feng Xingjian was immune to diabolic energy, all the divine-level magic prince warriors were unable to rely on diabolic energy. They could only rely on their own powers to fight against him. In terms of physical strength, there was no overwhelming difference between a divine-level expert and a level 29 expert. An existence like Li Shuanghua was much stronger than him in terms of her martial will. By the looks of it, his light pursuit was already able to close the gap between them through his super high-speed sword technique. Moreover, he still had the fourth sword, as well as the Heaven's Volition sword intent, terror ingurgitation, and the fifth sword which he had yet to perform. On Earth, Feng Xingjian was strong enough to go against a god-level expert. Since that was the case, why would he compromise? Li Shuanghua still doesn't take my strength seriously? Does she think that trash like you can stop me? Then I'll let her know how wrong she is. Feng Xingjian threw a glance at the female military officer and said calmly, "Scram. Tell the people from the Federation that as long as they immediately sever their relationship with Li Shuanghua, expel her from her position as a permanent member, and get her to hand over my mother's corpse or tell me where she is, I won't stop. I'll let you understand that not only are you not allowed to go against me, but if you encounter my enemies, if you don't immediately chop them up into 18 pieces and then send them to me, you'll suffer the most painful and bloody revenge." The female military officer looked at Feng Xingjian as if she was looking at a fool. However, at the next moment, she felt a gush of sword intent piercing through the top of her head. Her will was unable to withstand a single blow from this gush of sword intent, and in the blink of an eye, her physical body was completely controlled by this gush of will. She fell to the ground and rolled away. The female military officer rolled all the way into the elevator and then out of the first floor until she rolled out of the building's entrance. Covered in dirt and dirt, she stood up furiously. Her face was filled with shame and indignation as she looked in the direction of the building's top floor. She gritted her teeth and said, "This be asterisk starred, this lunatic." Her cell phone rang and a male voice rang out. "How is it?" He rejected it. The female military officer said furiously, "This guy is simply stubborn. If we don't teach him a lesson, he won't understand who he's going up against. Do it. Do it immediately. As long as we can capture this guy, it'll be a great merit." A short moment later, through the sound and light waves that Feng Xingjian had absorbed, he sensed that over 100 figures had broken into the building. Level after level of the building was taken over, and they were heading up to the top floor at an astonishing speed. Each of these figures was wrapped up in armor and looked like robots. They were fully armed and were like warriors from the future. Ordinary walls and floors would not be able to stop them. Under the enhancement of their mechanical exoskeletons, all of them were impenetrable and had great strength. Even the Fong clan's black crystal armored cavalry were brought down to the ground by them without any resistance. Downstairs, the female military officer looked at the mecha troop that was rapidly ascending to the top. She smiled coldly and said, "This is the Federation's newest mecha troop. Each set of mecha has 3 layers of explosion-proof metal. It's explosion-proof, pierce-proof, bullet-proof, heat-proof, and cold-proof. There's also the newest exoskeleton propulsion system, which amplifies each of their strength, agility, and explosive prowess by over 10 times. Coupled with plasma rifles and ring-shaped lightning swords, their destructive prowess can easily be compared to those second transition knights. Moreover, all of them have undergone long-term hypnosis and drug injections. Almost all of them have steely wills and are battle-hardened veterans. Unless they have the martial will of a divine-level expert, they won't be suppressed by any fist intent or sword intent. Moreover, each of them is a Magic Prince warrior who the Federation has spent 10 million to undergo their second transition." Next to her, a military officer nodded and said, "As long as they can successfully capture Fong Xingjian this time around, not only will they be able to get Madame Li Shuanghua's full support, but our troop will also be able to expand once again and become one of the Federation's core troops." The female military officer broke into a confident smile. Over 100 level 29 Magic Prince warriors were all equipped with top-notch individual equipment. Ever since their establishment, this troop had never had a single record of failure. They had even managed to suppress the rebellion of a region that had 100,000 elite soldiers with just these 100 people. In her opinion, Fong Xingjian was doomed. Not long after the two of them finished speaking, the armored warriors who had been advancing rapidly along the corridors came down one after another. After being casually swept by Fong Xingjian's sword intent, the fervent belief and steely wills that they had trained were not even worth a mention. One by one, their consciousness was stirred up by the sword intent, and they fainted. 10 minutes later, the female military officer stood at the building's entrance with a grim countenance, watching as the unconscious mecha warriors were carried out one after another. Suddenly, blood flowed out from her 7 apertures. A large number of her capillaries had been slashed and exploded by the sword force. Although the damage was not great, it made her look extremely terrifying. At this moment, the female military officer finally realized that as long as Fong Xingjian wanted to, he could kill her at any moment. Terrifying sword intent howled in her consciousness, leaving a seed of terror in her heart. Unless she could defeat Fong Xingjian, there would be a great flaw in her will for the rest of her life, and she would never be able to progress further. Several decades from now, she would have to live in Fong Xingjian's nightmares every day and night. However, she could no longer care so much. She ran into the car, but the female military officer had already fled with a terrified expression. Chapter 492. Fong Xingjian stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass window on the top floor of the building, watching as the mecha warriors and female military officers kept on being transported away. Fong Xingjian said to Tyrant, "You stay here and keep watch. I'll follow them and take a look." At the next moment, Infiltrating Void was activated, and his silhouette darted into spatial gaps, disappearing completely. Elsewhere, the female military officer got into a car, and the car sped away at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. The streets along the way were all sealed off. The female military officer looked at the caller ID on her cell phone with an extremely grim countenance. "No, we've failed. Yes, yes, yes. We'll be coming over right away." "Understood." After the female military officer put down the phone, she was taken aback. It was because she discovered that Fong Xingjian had unknowingly been sitting opposite her. She quickly pulled out her gun with one hand, but with a sweep of Fong Xingjian's sword intent, her body turned completely stiff unable to move. Then a hint of struggle, hesitation, and despair flashed in the female military officer's eyes. Her will had been completely suppressed by Fang Xingjian. She was like an egg that had been struck by a rock, shattering into dust. She could no longer muster up any strength to resist. Who are you reporting to? Where are the 7 members of the Fang clan's upper echelon who went against me? The female military officer said in a daze, I'm reporting to General Tang. Those 7 members of the upper echelon have all been brought to General Tang's house. Following that, Fang Xingjian asked a series of questions, gaining a better understanding of the entire Federation. If the 5 great clans' share in the Federation had only been 30% at the beginning, then after many years of erosion and the various extraordinary powers of divine-level experts, over 70% of the entire Federation was now controlled by the 5 great clans. Although there were internal strife between them, once they encountered external enemies, they would naturally join forces. It could be said that if Fang Xingjian were to go up against Li Shuanghua, the worst-case scenario would be for him to go up against the Federation and the other 4 divine-level experts. Unless Fang Xingjian could continue undefeated and defeat one opponent after another, he would let them know that the cost of going against him was much higher than the cost of going against Li Shuanghua. General Tang, who had contacted the female officer, was Li Shuanghua's spokesperson in the Earth Federation's Planetary Defense Office. He controlled the power of the Planetary Defense Force. I will uproot all your forces in the Federation. Let's see if you will come out or not. Where is General Tang? Take me there. Outside a villa in the suburbs of Sorcery City, Fang Xingjian strolled through the spatial gaps as if he was strolling in a garden. In just a few seconds, he had passed through many centuries, but he also discovered something unexpected. 3 young men dressed in black were quietly approaching the outer wall of the villa. If there's a divine-level expert lying in ambush, the 3 of them will be very good scouts. Moreover, with the abilities of these 3 rookies, they will definitely die if they go in. If I follow them, I can consider protecting their lives. After giving it some thought, Fang Xingjian followed behind the 3 of them. Looking at the majestic villa before them, the young man with slightly tanned skin who was in the lead said, "This is the place. According to the surveillance footage on the road, my younger sister was brought here in the end." Next to him, another young man said, "Ahow, this seems to be the military's territory. Let's not barge in." Another young man with a buzz cut also said, "I heard that the people staying here are members of the military's upper echelons. What on earth has your younger sister been involved in?" The young man with slightly tanned skin smiled coldly and said, "I've already investigated this. My younger sister isn't the only one who was sent here after she went missing. A few other young ladies have also gone missing here. There are even some female celebrities who have been here before. What do you think happened?" The countenance of the young man with a buzz cut changed, and he said, "Ahow, is what you said true? If that's the case, then the people inside are probably very dangerous. They're definitely people from the upper echelons." The tanned Ahow said, "If you guys want to leave, then leave. My parents handed my younger sister to me before they died. Even if I have to die inside, I must go in and give it a try." The young man with a buzz cut immediately said, "Ahow, what kind of people do you take us for? The people from the Vital Energy Dojo are all good brothers. If we're going to die, we'll just die together. We'll go in with you." The other young man with long hair hesitated for a moment before rejecting. "I can't go. I still need to take care of my grandmother. I'm sorry, Ahow, but I really can't go." Therefore, the 2 young men leaped over the wall one after another. The corners of Fang Xingjian's lips curled up slightly. He had already decided to save their lives. It was a pity that Ahow and the young man with a buzz cut were only at the first transition, and their infiltration and investigation abilities were only at the novice level. The moment they leaped over the wall, they were detected by the infrared warning system. In a short 2 minutes, they were surrounded by a large number of soldiers. A one-eyed military officer smiled coldly and looked at the 2 people who were surrounded. "The 2 of you are really daring. To think that you dare to barge in here." As he spoke, he waved his hand, and over 10 soldiers charged up, wanting to subdue the 2 of them. The two of them were only at the first transition, and in the blink of an eye, they were completely suppressed. However, just as Ahau was about to be subdued, Fang Xingjian, who was hiding in the spatial gaps, suddenly tapped out with a finger, releasing a stream of sword intent onto Ahau's body. At the next moment, Ahau slapped out with his palm as if he had the help of the gods. With a loud rumble, strong forces shot out in all directions, and sword chi seethed. Streams of sword force shot out in all directions with his palm as the center. The explosive power in this instant was as if several 100,000 kilograms worth of explosives had been set off. As the earth trembled and the mountains swayed, a large half of the manor was flattened, and the area with a range of several 10,000 square meters turned into ruins. Several hundred soldiers were killed by the explosion, leaving only Ahau and the military officer standing on the spot, looking at the ruins in a daze. Ahau looked at his palm in a daze, as if he could not believe that he had done all this. What an expert! The one-eyed military officer let out a furious bellow and shot out from the ruins. He glared at Ahau and said, "I'm the Planetary Defense's World Annihilation Frenzied Saber. An expert like you is definitely not a nobody, right? Report." Ahau subconsciously punched out across space, and the second transition, level 29 Magic Prince Warrior before him exploded, turning into a rain of blood. Then, under his companion's astonished gaze, Ahau stomped down on the ground, and the ground within a range of 1 kilometer instantly exploded, revealing a large area of the underground structure and the true appearance of the manor. At the next moment, several tens of powerful auras locked onto Ahau and the military officer, and endless killing intents gushed out toward them. The young man with a buzz cut opened his mouth wide and exclaimed, "Damn, Ahau, you're amazing." Chapter 493. Ahau also looked at the scene before him in a daze. He said in disbelief, "To think that I'm so amazing? To think that I'm so damn amazing?" At this moment, dozens of experts walked out from the underground base. Among them, 8 were firmly protected in the center. 7 of them were the Fang clan's upper echelon who were being protected here. The remaining one was a skinny old man with a full beard. He was General Tang, the Fang clan spokesperson in the military. Although he looked very old, he was still in high spirits. He exuded a heroic aura like that of a dragon and a tiger, making him not to be underestimated. An old director of a corporation looked at the ruins on the ground in panic and shouted, "Is Fang Xingjian here? Is Fang Xingjian here?" General Tang slapped the old director's face and shouted, "What are you shouting for? If you don't wish to die, then stay here quietly." As he spoke, he had already walked up and was 100 meters away from Ahau. "Lad, who are you? Do you know where you barged into today?" Ahau looked at the people in military uniforms. Even if he did not recognize the insignia on each of them, he knew that they were definitely members of the military's upper echelon. He said nervously, "I'm Lai Wenhao. My younger sister has been kidnapped and brought here by you guys. Release her immediately." "What nonsense are you talking about?" General Tang frowned. He had thought that they were people sent by Fang Xingjian, but now it seemed that they were completely unrelated and could not be put together. He waved his hand and said, "Take them down." However, not a single person in the surroundings moved. Let alone moving, all of them fell down one after another. The people next to General Tang were all elites in the Fang clan's army. There were several tens of them, and all of them were level 29 Magic Prince warriors. Although they could not be said to have been through hundreds of battles, they were all powerful warriors who were fully equipped with excellent equipment. To think that all of them had fallen without a sound. Just then, Fang Xingjian had already walked out from the spatial gaps. Looking at the 7 people and General Tang, who were the only ones left standing, he said calmly, "You guys dare to lure me here without even a single divine-level expert lying in ambush?" General Tang's face twitched. He looked at Fang Xingjian and said, "You're Fang Xingjian?" Fang Xingjian did not say anything. He merely looked at the 7 members of the Fang clan's upper echelon, and his disposition became increasingly indistinct. Ever since he had come out of seclusion in the great western city, his abilities had become increasingly unfathomable, and his sword intent had become increasingly unfathomable. After the battle with Li Shuanghua's doppelganger, this situation became more and more serious. It was as if he was incompatible with the entire world, as if he would disappear into thin air at any moment. Seeing that he had been completely ignored, General Tang's eyes flashed with a hint of anger. His entire body flashed with a green glow, and an explosive air current shot out from his back. His entire body was like a rocket as he charged towards Fang Xingjian. Simultaneously, electricity flashed all over his body, and a layer of metal armor covered him. At this moment, the power of his magic prince, muscles, and armor merged into one, condensing into his hands. He formed seals with both hands, and it was 70% to 80% similar to the big hand that Li Shuanghua had condensed with her martial will. As his hands clashed out, there was the sound of wind and thunder, as if there were a myriad of thunderbolts exploding in the air. Faced with General Tang's palm attack, which had been unleashed at 120%, Fang Xingjian struck out with a casual palm strike, and the two were locked in a stalemate. It was a pity that when their palms came into contact, General Tang's face flushed red, and all the blood vessels throughout his body pulsated. He felt as if he had collided into an aircraft carrier, and his body was suppressed to the point where he was unable to move. He could only endure the waves of rebounding force, unable to say a single word. However, Fang Xingjian's countenance remained calm as he said softly, "You're so weak. Why do you still want to fight against me?" At the next moment, a seething power exploded in General Tang's body. He let out a loud cry and spat out a large mouthful of blood. Then he flew backward rapidly and landed on his butt. Too weak, Fang Xingjian did not feel any joy from attaining a breakthrough. He merely shook his head and said, "I know that you're still unconvinced, and I also know that this attack won't hurt you or the Federation. Therefore, I've spared your life. I'll be bringing the 7 people from the Fang clan away today. However, I'll come again tomorrow. I hope that you guys can give me a surprise." Fang Xingjian then turned to look at the 7 members of the Fang clan's upper echelon. With a casual sweep of his sword intent, the astonishment, terror, anxiety, and fear that the 7 of them had felt earlier disappeared. They walked out like walking corpses, rushing toward the Fang clan's building. Fang Xingjian then looked at Hao and Fang Xingjian. The two of them looked at Fang Xingjian with excitement and nervousness. By now, how could they still not know that Fang Xingjian was the one who had interfered in the dark? Fang Xingjian did not say anything. He merely swept out his sword intent, telling them that Ahao's younger sister was under a pile of rubble over 30 meters behind him. With Fang Xingjian's deliberate protection, she was unscathed. The two of them aren't bad. I don't wish for them to die. This sentence was said to General Tang. Fang Xingjian believed that as long as he was still alive, no one would be able to target these 2 young men. Fang Xingjian then left, exuding an increasingly otherworldly aura. It was as if he did not care about what would happen next. Fang Xingjian then returned to the Fang clan's building. However, it did not take long for him to understand that the Federation's attitude and retaliation were even more intense and explosive than he had imagined. In a conference room in the center of Demonic City that belonged to the Earth's Federation, a huge commotion had broken out. Terror, terror, fun. This is downright terror. If we were to let off a person who has taken the initiative to attack the military and innocent citizens, then the entire Federation's reputation would be ruined. However, Fang Xingjian is very strong. Ordinary means probably won't work. What about Lady Li Shuanghua and the others? It's best if we can get divine-level experts to take action immediately. We must suppress this Fang Xingjian immediately. Lady Li Shuanghua, Lord Thunder Monarch, and Lord Despot haven't replied. Lord Tiandao and Lord Titan are still in Miracle World and can't get away for now. Just then, General Tang, who was wrapped up in white bandages, coughed. Then he said with a grim countenance, "I suggest that we send out the Zero Troop." Zero Troop? This needs to be confirmed by the permanent council members, right? In such a short period of time. General Tang said with a vicious expression. Are you guys going to watch as Fang Xingjian wreaks havoc in Demonic City while we're unable to do anything about it? With that, he clapped his hands, and someone brought stacks of documents over from behind. This is an emergency secret order issued by Lady Li Shuanghua. We've already obtained the agreement of the other divine level experts. We're to immediately activate the Zero Troop. We must suppress Fang Xingjian within the shortest amount of time possible and eliminate all negative influences. Chapter 494. At the top of the Fang clan's building, Xingjian stood in midair. With each step he took, he stepped on void space and was able to stand in midair. Usually, when he flew in midair, he would step on the air at high speed. However, this time around, he did not move at all. He just stood quietly in midair, like a fish swimming in the water or a bird soaring in the sky. Tyrant, who was also floating in midair, looked down at the flourishing city and said, "You've also successfully condensed the specialty air trampling. With this specialty, you'll be able to soar with the help of the geomagnetic forces. Exerting force in midair will be no different from exerting force on the ground." Fang Xingjian walked out step by step. He felt that he was stepping on a magnetic field, and it was no different from stepping on the ground. There was the same reaction force, and he could still run and jump. This was the specialty air trampling. It was also the latest specialty that Fang Xingjian had successfully condensed. During this period of time, with Tyron's demigod physical body, which had attained 2 tiers of perfection, it had been much easier for Fang Xingjian to condense specialty seeds. His abilities seemed to be changing every minute and second. Tyron looked at Fang Xingjian, who was standing in the sky, and felt a faint pressure in his heart. Ever since he repelled Li Shuanghua's doppelganger, his aura has become more and more unfathomable. Even now, I don't know what level his swordsmanship has reached. He then looked at the flourishing city under his feet, and his eyes gleamed with curiosity. The people in this world are really special. Although there are very few divine-level experts, all sorts of machinery are extremely developed. They can even mass-produce level 29 experts. As the area where the 2 worlds overlapped was over the sea, Tyrant had followed Fang Xingjian from Miracle World's Western Sea to this world's Eastern Sea. He had always thought that he had just followed Fang Xingjian to another world. However, Fang Xingjian was still condensing the 5th god-slaying sword. The martial will of a divine-level expert can spread out at light speed, encompassing a range of 1,000 meters. Therefore, it's unrealistic to use one's physical body to go up against it. After all, a single thought of the other party would be transmitted at light speed. When it hit you, you probably wouldn't even be able to clench your fist tightly. It would be impossible to use your physical body to go up against it. The only thing that can go up against will is will. Although my chasing light can make use of the time difference and attack them for 1/100th of a second before they can react, this amount of time won't be enough to kill them and gain an absolute advantage. The 4th sword, all-conquering, has great destructive prowess, but it's not as fast as light pursuit. It's too easy for them to interfere and dodge it. I need the 5th sword. Only then can I have a decisive advantage. Fang Xingjian felt that with his abilities, the 4 god-slaying swords, the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent, and the Terra Ingurgitation as his killing moves, he was already on par with the divine-level experts on Earth in this unique battlefield. However, in order to become stronger, he would still need to be able to perform the 5th god-slaying sword at any time. In Fang Xingjian's opinion, this sword attack was one that could allow the weak to win against the strong. It was a sword attack that could kill a divine level will directly. Just as Fang Xingjian was slowly condensing his 5th sword, there were strange movements below the Fang clan's building. Fang Xingjian stood on the rooftop and looked at the rows of mechanical soldiers walking over. He was surprised. Robots! He looked up and saw many metal monsters flying in the sky. Rows of high-speed machine guns and rockets were aimed at his body. Fang Yuehe said nervously, "It's a purely mechanized troop. It's also the trump card that our Fang clan has set up in the Federation, the Zero Troop. Powerful conferred knights, demigods, or even divine-level experts are able to destroy an ordinary warriors with a single thought. Therefore, robot armies were specially developed to fend off consciousness attacks. The outer shells of these robots are all made of superalloy, and they are equipped with various weapons developed to deal with second transition enemies. Xinjiang, you must be careful. Fang Yuehe looked at Fang Xinjiang a little worriedly. In just a few short hours, Li Shuanghua had been deposed by Fang Xinjiang. However, although Fang Xinjiang was the clan head in name, the actual administrative matters had all been handed over to Fang Yuehe. Fang Xinjiang did not restrict Fang Yuehe at all, nor did he intend to interfere. This made Fang Yuehe, who had been suppressed by his younger brother and mother for a long period of time, feel extremely exhilarated. He even hoped more and more that Fang Xinjiang would be able to defeat Li Shuanghua and truly become the clan head. This way, he would be able to maintain his position of being second only to Fang Xinjiang. As Fang Xinjiang listened to Fang Yuehe's introduction, he looked at the mechanized troops under his feet and shook his head. Stubborn. In his opinion, with his infiltrating void sword, no mechanical troops would be a match for him. After all, no matter how hard one's shell was or how sturdy their armor was, could their chips and circuits be that sturdy? Fang Xinjiang's infiltrating void sword was able to penetrate through all matter and attack from within the opponent's body. Li Shuanghua should know of my infiltrating void sword. She wishes to deepen the conflict between the Federation and me, using someone else to do her dirty work. Fang Xinjiang laughed coldly in his heart. Then I'll shatter the entire blade and crush the person holding it to death. Let's see if you'll come out then. Just then, Fang Yuehe's cell phone rang. He picked it up and looked at Fang Xinjiang in astonishment, saying, "It's General Tang. He's looking for you." Fang Xinjiang shook his head and let Fang Yuehe hang up the phone. He then looked at the robot troops under his feet. With a flash, he completely disappeared. The infiltrating void sword was activated, and streams of sword force burst out explosively in the bodies of the robots. Fang Xinjiang moved about in the spatial gaps, massacring the surrounding robots. He felt that it was as easy as mowing grass. His attention was not on this at all. He thought, after killing this batch, if Li Shuanghua still doesn't come out, I'll kill my way to the Federation's headquarters. I'll wreak havoc and turn the world upside down. I must find out her whereabouts. Several tens of kilometers away, hearing the busy tone from the phone, General Tang was so infuriated that his eyes turned bloodshot. Arrogant. This kid is too arrogant. Mobilize all the troops. I'm going to beat this kid up until he kneels down and begs me. General Tang's expression turned increasingly vicious as he looked at the command platform. The green dots that represented the many robot warriors were rapidly approaching the Fang clan's building. Each robot warrior was worth several tens of millions and could be said to be extremely expensive weapons. Similarly, they were also extremely powerful. Not only were all consciousness attacks ineffective, but they were also equipped with laser weapons that could deal with cultivators with high speed, as well as vibrating joints that could deal with cultivators with strength, and many other high-tech weapons that were specially developed to deal with warriors with powerful bodies. However, the light dots on the command platform had only moved for 1 to 2 seconds when all the light dots dimmed at the next moment. What's going on? Is there a problem with the communications? There's no problem with the network. There's no problem with the command platform. Activate the satellite and check out the situation. On the big screen, the streets near the Fang clan's building were displayed clearly. However, when the people at the command platform saw the rows of robot troops that had fallen to the ground and were emitting black smoke, General Tang's mouth opened wide. Thinking of the value of this robot army, thinking of how he had spent so many years and expended so much wealth, General Tang was so infuriated that he spurted out a mouthful of blood. At the next moment, his vision turned black and he fainted. Chapter 495. Damn it, he really deserves to die. This Fang Xinjiang is really audacious. The design, research, experiments, and production of a Zero Troop have been invested over 10 billion yuan. To think that it has been destroyed just like that. Someone has to step forward and take responsibility. Old Tang is no longer suitable to continue working in the planetary defense. Let him go to the military court. The crux of the problem now is not who is in charge of this matter, but how on earth did Fang Xingjian defeat the Zero Troop? All of you have seen the recordings left behind at the scene, but we don't even know what methods he used. In the Federation's conference room, a group of people broke out into a commotion. It was not that they had not considered the possibility that Fang Xingjian might be able to fend off the Zero Troop. After all, he was an expert who could defeat Li Shuanghua's clone. What they had not expected was that Fang Xingjian would be able to defeat the Zero Troop so easily. At the head of the conference room, a bald, middle-aged Caucasian man with a face full of scars said, "There are so many people here, but none of you can tell what methods he used." He was the commander-in-chief of the planetary defense of the Earth's Federation, an existence nicknamed the Flame Demon. Hearing the Flame Demon's words, everyone present stopped what they were doing. A hint of shame flashed on most of their faces, but they were unable to refute him. The Flame Demon knocked on the table and said, "The Fang clan has sent a letter saying that it was written by Fang Xingjian. Take a look." With that, he tossed a letter onto the table. An officer picked it up instinctively, tore open the envelope, and was about to read the contents of the letter. However, at the next moment, a gush of sword intent gushed out, pressing down everyone in the conference room onto the ground. It was so strong that they could not even raise their heads. The Flame Demon's muscular body smashed onto the ground with a loud rumble. He was also the only person present who could raise his head with great difficulty. He gritted his teeth and glared. This damned Fang Xingjian. However, Fang Xingjian's sword intent was even more terrifying than when he was in the Great Western region. The Flame Demon had just finished saying this when his head smashed onto the ground with a boom, and he was no longer able to move at all. Simultaneously, a voice rang out in everyone's hearts. It was the message that Fang Xingjian had left behind. "If you don't hand over Li Shuanghua or tell me his whereabouts before midnight, I will personally flatten the Federation." Along with Fang Xingjian's message, a murderous aura soared into the sky. A few officers could not withstand the stimulation of this murderous aura and directly fainted. After a long time, the sword intent dissipated, and the entire command room was in chaos. "Doctor, call the doctor over immediately. All the unconscious people must be sent out immediately. Make way, don't block the exit." The Flame Demon angrily smashed his fist on the table, shattering the round table in the conference room. Beside him, an adjutant said, "My lord, what should we do? If we don't draw a clear line with Li Shuanghua and reveal her location, I'm afraid that Fang Xingjian will massacre the headquarters here tonight." Another adjutant said, "Sir, a gentleman does not stand in front of a dangerous wall. No matter what we choose, we should quickly move. This place is too close to Fang Xingjian. It's too dangerous." Damn it. Hearing their suggestions, the Flame Demon felt even more infuriated. As a commander-in-chief of the Federation's planet defense, when had he ever been so cowardly? This Fang Xingjian is really lawless. A person who disregards the rules of society like nothing is going against society. He must be annihilated. Despot, the Thunder Monarch, and the others still haven't replied. Lord Despot has been in the laboratory for over 30 days, but there hasn't been any reply. Lord Despot said that he enjoys watching the Fang clan's internal strife the most. If we invite him to come and kill Li Shuanghua, he'll come. To think that none of the 5 divine-level experts from Earth had come out to help the Flame Demon suppress Fang Xingjian. This was the Flame Demon's greatest worry right now. However, just then, a young man who bore 70% to 80% resemblance to the Flame Demon, but was even younger and more youthful, walked in. Seeing the infuriated Flame Demon and the messy command room, the young man smiled and said, "Yo, brother, seems like you've met with some trouble." Seeing the young man's appearance, the Flame Demon was pleasantly surprised. "Shan Kong, why have you returned? Weren't you cultivating in the Tower of Time?" Shan Kong was originally the Planet Defense's trump card and Special Forces soldier. He was also the Flame Demon's younger brother. 5 years ago, he had been discovered to have black magic talent and joined the gold-robed mages. He had been cultivating gold faction black magic in Miracle World's Tower of Time for a long period of time. Although the gold-robed mages, silver-robed mages, and black-robed mages were few in number, they had always been seen as the three types of black magic with the strongest head-on battle prowess. Unlike the gray-robed mages' summoning and physical body modification, and the green-robed mages' imitation and integration, the gold-robed mages' black magic specialized in the domain of time. The Flame Demon had always had high hopes for this younger brother of his. When he had been in the planet defense, he had already been a level 29 Magic Prince warrior. He was a powerful cultivator, the spearhead of the core troops, and a genius amongst geniuses. Over the past 5 years, he had been cultivating black magic in Miracle World, and his abilities had become increasingly unfathomable. Many people in the Federation even felt that Shan Kong was one of the geniuses who had the highest possibility of becoming the 6th divine level expert on Earth. Li Shuanghua sent me news saying that you've met with trouble. After hearing the Flame Demon's explanation, Shan Kong laughed out loud and said, "He's just a demigod with one tier of perfection. However, he's able to force Li Shuanghua's clone to retreat, so he does have some abilities. However, he's at most at the level of a demigod, with 2 tiers of perfection." The Flame Demon advised that Fang Xingjian's sword arts are no small matter. Shan Kong, don't be careless. Brother, you've stayed on Earth for too long. Don't think that he's amazing just because he managed to wipe out so many level 29 Magic Prince warriors. The level 29 Magic Prince warriors on Earth are all mass-produced goods. They're much weaker than the level 29 knights in Miracle World. Shan Kong smiled, shook his head, and said, "And the difference between black magic and knights is the same as the difference between a knight and an ordinary Magic Prince warrior. As long as he hasn't attained the divine level, I'll kill all the people like Fang Xingjian." The Flame Demon looked at everyone's expressions and said, "Shan Kong, don't underestimate Fang Xingjian." He felt that his younger brother was too arrogant and was afraid that he would offend others. However, Shan Kong had stayed in Miracle World for 5 years and was used to the concept of mages being a cut above others. Moreover, he was an extremely rare gold-robed mage, even amongst the 12 factions of mages. He continued, "Don't worry, brother. Let's not talk about a mere Fang Xingjian. After a while, I'll also challenge Li Shuanghua. I want to see how far I'm from reaching the divine level." The Flame Demon shook his head helplessly and could only choose to believe in his younger brother. He took command in the command center and waited for Fang Xingjian's arrival. When it was almost 11 o'clock, the Flame Demon could not help but ask, "Shan Kong, how confident are you? Do you need me to prepare intercontinental missiles?" Shan Kong shook his head helplessly, feeling that this elder brother of his was too wishy-washy. "There's no need for intercontinental missiles. Moreover, don't you know the consequences of using intercontinental missiles in a place like Demonic City?" Seeing that his elder brother was still wearing a grim expression, Shan Kong could not help but sigh. "Brother, I've already mastered the level 9 black magic, gracefulness of time. No matter how powerful Fang Xingjian is, it's impossible for him to win against me." Gracefulness of time? Level 9 black magic. That must be very powerful, right? Of course. A hint of pride flashed on Shan Kong's face. "As long as all attacks come within 50 meters of me, they won't be able to exceed a speed of 30 meters per second. Even gods won't be able to do so." Chapter 496. Xingjian. There's still no news from the Federation. Fang Yueha looked at Fang Xingjian's back and had a blurry feeling. It was as if many long swords were pressing against his body, and there was a slight piercing pain on his face. Hearing Fang Yueha's words, the killing intent in Fang Xingjian's eyes grew increasingly intense. Based on what Fang Qian had said earlier, Li Shuanghua and the others would probably start the refinement of the divine weapon in another 1 to 2 days. However, the Federation kept on dragging their time. Even after 1 day and 1 night, having exchanged blows 3 times, the other party still had not fully understood the situation and was still hoping for a fluke. Fang Xingjian's killing intent grew increasingly stronger with his status as the #1 influence on Earth. I've given you face, but you don't want it. At the next moment, as Fang Xingjian activated the infiltrating void sword, he completely disappeared. Fang Xingjian had already found out about the Planetary Defense's command center in Demonic City. This time around, he decided not to hold back anymore and was going to go on a killing spree. This was to prevent the Federation's upper echelon from thinking that they could still drag things out and protect Li Shuanghua. Standing in midair, Fang Xingjian looked down at the command center, which took up several 100,000 square meters. The command center of the Planetary Defense was almost as big as a university campus, with countless people patrolling to and fro. All sorts of battle machines had been set up, and Fang Xingjian could even see 5 to 6 fighter jets flying across the sky occasionally. I was still too naive. I thought that my series of performances and the 3 consecutive attacks were enough to intimidate the Federation. It seems like I didn't go on a killing spree enough, letting them think that they can play both sides and even subdue me. This time around, I'll let you guys bleed. Fang Xingjian wanted to let the entire Federation know that if they did not give up on Li Shuanghua immediately, the entire Federation and Earth would have to face an unbearably great loss. And he, Fang Xingjian, was much, much more valuable than Li Shuanghua. Fang Xingjian, who was in the spatial gap, charged out and penetrated over 100 meters underground. Countless streams of sword force that could cleave mountains and rocks erupted from underground, incessantly slicing the ground. Within a short few minutes, Fang Xingjian had used his sword force to slash through the ground around the command center, forming an oval-shaped soft area. He had weakened the connection between the surface and the underground of the command center, and even countless underground fortifications had been slashed into smithereens, collapsing completely. Inside the command room, Balrog stood up as he sensed the tremors beneath his feet. What's going on? Is it an earthquake? However, after thinking about it, he felt that something was not right. Shanghai was not an earthquake zone at all. How could there be an earthquake? However, the shaking under their feet was getting stronger and stronger. Even the entire building was starting to sink slightly. At this moment, everyone felt that something was wrong. The flame demon said angrily, "Quickly send someone to investigate what's going on." Almost everyone in the command center was mobilized to search for the cause of the earthquake. However, no matter how they looked, they could not find the cause. They could only feel the ground of their command center shaking continuously. Some buildings even sank and large cracks appeared in the ground. However, the other buildings that were 1 street away from them were completely unscathed. Hearing his subordinates report and sensing the tremors coming from under his feet, the flame demon frowned and said worriedly to his younger brother, Shan Kong, "Do you think that it's Fang Xingjian who's causing trouble down there?" Fang Xingjian? Shan Kong broke into a nonchalant smile. Could it be that he's thinking of digging down there and causing our building to collapse? To think that he would even do such a despicable act. I've really overestimated him. The flame demon sighed and said, "If it's really him, we can't let him continue doing this. We must stop him." However, just as the two of them were discussing, they felt their bodies lighten slightly, and they began to float. The gravity is gone. Both of them were level 29 Magic Prince warriors, and Shan Kong had also cultivated black magic on the side. He was extremely powerful and had an extremely meticulous control over his physical body. At this moment, when their bodies felt slightly lighter, they could sense that the gravity on their bodies had disappeared. However, they were not the only ones. Everything in the entire room started to float up. Outside the room, all the buildings swayed slightly, as if they were going to float up into the sky. Everyone also slowly floated up from the ground, looking at everything in astonishment. Terra Ingurgitation was activated. With the activation of the level 8 Terra Ingurgitation, all the gravity within a range of 8 kilometers disappeared. Countless people watched in a daze as their bodies floated up, feeling extremely astonished. There were people who were playing with their computers, and their computers flew up together with them. There were people who were bathing, and their bodies and water droplets all floated up into the air. There were also couples who were having sex, and they all cried out in astonishment as they floated up. As Xian country's great city, Demonic City had a very high population density. With the activation of terror ingurgitation this time around, it immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Fang Xingjian had gone deep underground, and there were countless tall buildings in Demonic City. This time around, the gravity brought about by terror ingurgitation was unprecedented. This terrifying power was being guided by Fang Xingjian's unparalleled sword arts cultivation to the ground within a range of several hundred meters above his head. 50 meters underground, a pure white finger suddenly appeared in void space with a flash. Then an extremely terrifying power instantly exploded from the tip of the finger. The white finger was like an embroidery needle, guiding this astronomical power that could crush any human creation on Earth. It was like an embroidery needle, carefully and softly pointing at the Earth's rock layer above. At this moment, the sword arts cultivation that Fang Xingjian displayed seemed to have reached the extreme of lightness and heaviness. He gathered the astronomical power into a single finger, and then released it as easily as an embroidery needle. The power started to spread out from a single point in the rock stratum, spreading upwards like layers and layers of fine rain. It was also like a wave, expanding from a single point to a surface. Wherever the power of terra ingurgitation passed by, all the ground would be shaken into dust. When it reached an average distance of 50 meters from the ground, the violent explosive force turned into a complete pushing force, pushing the several 100,000 square meters of land in the command center toward the sky. With a rumble, under the horrified gazes of countless people in Demonic City, a piece of land that was hundreds of thousands of square meters in size and seemed to be the size of a university campus rose into the air. It paused in midair for a moment before flying toward the sky at an extremely fast speed. On the land, Shan Kong was almost the first to react. He let out a terrified cry and was about to flee out of the land. However, with the first step he took, the air pressure that descended from the sky under the extreme acceleration of the land, turned into many huge, invisible hands that pressed down toward him. All the air within a range of 50 meters accelerated together with the land's acceleration, turning into astonishing gales that pressed down toward Shan Kong. The moment they came within 50 meters of him, their speed kept on decreasing. However, their power did not weaken in the slightest. They were like waves of tsunamis, pressing down toward Shan Kong slowly yet firmly. Chapter 497. At this moment, even though he possessed a high-level black magic like the gracefulness of time, it was completely useless when faced with the pressure from all directions. Shan Kong let out an enraged bellow, and the golden light on his body burst out. Countless golden prints covered his body, propelling him out crazily. However, as the Earth continued to accelerate toward the sky, the pressure descending from the sky got increasingly stronger, causing Shan Kong's speed to become increasingly slower. With each step he took, it was as if he was moving at the bottom of the sea, which was several 10,000 meters deep. Roar, roar, roar. The power throughout Shan Kong's body surged once again, and his body swelled up to over 2 times its original size. Many blood vessels in his body exploded. Around him, more and more buildings and people were compressed in a meat paste by the wind pressure descending from the sky. Under the high-speed friction, heavenly fire descended, incinerating everything. The flame demon watched as everything in his sight was slapped in a meat paste and then burned into ashes. His eyes were filled with despair and regret. Fang Xingjian, you're really ruthless. With a boom, he was completely blasted into countless pieces by the wind pressure and high temperature. Shan Kong finally arrived at the edge of the land amidst the final explosion. By now, the land had already reached the stratosphere. Looking down, there were white clouds everywhere. Just as he was about to take a step out and jump off the land, the wind pressure seemed to have increased to an extreme. Shan Kong's body fell to the ground with a bang, and he was like a toad that had been smashed by a palm. He was pressed down on the ground, unable to move. Thereafter, no matter how much he struggled or how much strength he used, he could only watch as he got closer and closer to outer space. In the end, as he got closer and closer to outer space, the air became increasingly thinner, and the flames gradually disappeared. The wind pressure also got increasingly lower, and the temperature continued to drop. Frost started to form in the surroundings. When Shan Kong slowly stood up with his battered body, his body floated up slowly. He could no longer breathe through his nose, and his gaze was in a daze as he looked at the black void space before him. The entire land had entered outer space. Without the interference of the atmospheric layer, it no longer slowed down. Instead, it continued to accelerate and fly toward outer space. Shan Kong turned his head and looked at the azure blue planet that continued to shrink in size. His eyes were filled with despair. Right now, he was the only living person on the entire land. His flame of life was also slowly dissipating as the temperature dropped and the air decreased. But up until now, he hadn't even seen Fang Xingjian's face. Fang Xingjian. Shan Kong dropped to his knees with a bang. What a fine Fang Xingjian. Suddenly, as the land continued to fly, he looked in the direction of the moon and saw a huge left word engraved on the back of the moon. What the hell is this? On Earth, the scene of demonic city soaring into the sky had already spread throughout the world. The internet was filled with people from Shanghai using their phones and cameras to capture the horrifying scene. On Weibo, blogs, and major web portals, there were discussions about this horrifying scene. February 2037, 0:14 p.m. In the northwest region of Shanghai, more than 250,000 square meters of land rose into the sky and broke through the atmosphere. According to the observation of experts from the Aerospace Science and Technology Institute, after the entire continent breaks through the atmosphere, it has already broken through the third cosmic speed and will eventually fly out of the solar system in about 50 years. Currently, there are no organizations or individuals who have expressed their responsibility for this incident. Some locals have stated that after the continent rose into the sky, they witnessed a man floating in midair for 5 minutes. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged by 500 points this morning. Let us invite experts to discuss the impact this incident will have on the world economy. The entire world seemed to be in an uproar because of this sword attack by Fang Xingjian. However, as the world's #1 organization, the Earth Federation's upper echelon seemed to have fallen completely silent. They were not the only ones who had fallen silent. All the clans who knew that this sword attack had come from Fang Xingjian had fallen silent. In the north of Xian country, in the Hua clan, although they did not belong to the 5 great clans, the Hua clan was one of the strongest influences in Xian country. They had been occupying the northeast region of Xian country for a long period of time, monopolizing many businesses. Right now, the Hua clan's old master was looking at the tablet computer in his hands. Before him, a middle-aged man said, "Father, this Fang Xingjian is really not giving our Hua clan any face. If he wants to cause trouble with Li Shuanghua, what right does he have to cripple Mimi? Mimi is your biological granddaughter. That fellow, Fang Xingjian, must pay the price." The matter that the middle-aged man was talking about was naturally the matter of Fang Xingjian crippling Hua Mimi. This matter had enraged everyone in the Hua clan. This was especially so when they found out that both the Federation and Li Shuanghua wanted to deal with Fang Xingjian. This made them want to get a share of the spoils in the process. As the middle-aged man spoke, the other Hua clan's descendants all appeared to be filled with righteous indignation. However, before the middle-aged man could finish speaking, the Hua clan's old master lifted his head and asked, "Which one of you can send a piece of land with an area of 250,000 square meters flying into outer space?" The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Father, what kind of joke is that? Even a divine-level expert wouldn't be able to do that. This kind of thing." At the next moment, the Hua clan's old master projected the image of the continent flying into outer space onto the big screen. Looking at the image, The entire Hua clan's conference room fell silent for a very long time. The Hua clan's old master sighed and said, "Just take it that I never had this granddaughter." At the same time, in the east of Demonic City, a black man with a height of over 5 meters, who looked like a chimpanzee, was soaking in a man-made hot spring. Around him, countless beauties dressed in chiffon clothes were pouring water for him, massaging him, and cutting fruits. He was the clan head of the Onassis clan, one of the 5 great clans. He was one of the 5 divine level experts on Earth, and he had the nickname Despot. Right now, the 5 great clans on Earth were the Fong clan, the Black Man's Onassis clan, the Old Caucasian clan, and the Medici clan, which Jessica had previously belonged to. One of the remaining 2 was the Ford clan, which had the greatest technological influence. The other was the Tiandao clan, which was the most mysterious of the 5 great clans, and also had the strongest divine level expert. Before the despot, an old black man with a head full of white hair said, "That's basically it. Clan head, should we consider giving Caroline away? After all, it's not wise to offend such an expert. Moreover, we can join forces with him to deal with Li Shuanghua. She's the true enemy of our clan." The despot, who was like a huge chimpanzee, said, "Hand her over? What kind of joke is this? You want me to give in to the Fong clan?" Before the old black man could react, a palm the size of a door descended from the sky, slapping him into a pile of meat paste. "Tell Caroline that with me protecting her, she can continue to stay in Demonic City. As long as that Fong Xinjiang dares to lay a hand on her, I'll tear that guy's body apart." Chapter 498. That night, the female military officer who had previously looked for Fong Xinjiang and warned Fong Xinjiang knelt down at the entrance of the building, asking for forgiveness from Fong Xinjiang. In the planetary defense, all the survivors who were related to this incident were locked up on charges of antisocial activities, awaiting trial by the military court. Simultaneously, a tremendous amount of information regarding Li Shuanghua from the Federation was sent over to Fong Xinjiang. The entire Federation seemed to have completely submitted to Fong Xinjiang's martial prowess. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the sky above a small island that had not been marked on the map, Fong Xinjiang stood in void space, scanning the streams of light waves with his heaven's perception as he observed the situation on the small island. Although he had left Demonic City, the only region that overlapped with Miracle World, and the ether particles were almost non-existent, to a demigod like Fong Xinjiang, the energy in his body was sufficient for him to do many things. Li Shuanghua had secretly set up a large number of laboratories across the world, and even Fong Yuehe did not know about most of them. It was because Li Shuanghua had used the Earth Federation's resources, and a large number of experts at the Earth Federation's upper echelon had grasped a lot of information about the laboratories. Right now, the largest laboratory was under Fong Xinjiang's feet. It was also the laboratory where Fong Xinjiang's mother's corpse was most likely to be placed. However, it could also be the place where Li Shuanghua was hiding. Therefore, before Fong Xinjiang really invaded, he still scanned the base carefully and gathered information. Seems to be. Not here? Fong Xinjiang's eyes narrowed slightly, and, at the next moment, he entered the spatial gaps and headed in the direction of the base. This time, he directly walked around the entire base and found that most of the laboratories were conducting all kinds of human experiments. They had turned some men and women who had come from an unknown place into Magic Prince warriors and then used the bodies of these Magic Prince warriors to experiment on forging divine weapons. Throughout the entire process, those men and women were like lab rats, being grabbed and controlled by many mechanical arms from the beginning to the end. They were unable to resist at all. Such bloody and cruel experiments made even Fong Xinjiang's brows twitch. Even in Miracle World, in order to increase their military power, the various countries would not do such antisocial things. This was something that only an evil cult like the Serene Shrine would do. Especially when he thought about the fact that his mother's body was right here, the murderous intent in his heart grew even stronger. As he walked, Fong Xinjiang sent out streams of sword intent into the brains of the staff members. As long as he found his mother's corpse, he would immediately detonate his sword intent, turning all of them into brain-dead and vegetative states. Finally, after walking for so long, Feng Xingjian found his target at the lowest level of the laboratory, a secret room made of pure metal. He stepped out of the void and looked at the ice coffin that was over 3 meters tall and emitting waves of cold air. There was a complicated look in his eyes. The ice coffin was very thick, but Feng Xingjian had heaven's perception and could clearly see what was happening inside the ice coffin. It was a lady who looked to be in her 20s, as if she had gathered all the spiritual qi in the world. She was dressed in white palace clothes and lay inside, looking as if she was still alive. Her bright red lips, face, long eyelashes, and fair skin made her look as if she was still alive. However, what made Feng Xingjian's heart pound the most was her appearance. Her eyes, nose, and mouth all bore a 70% to 80% resemblance to Feng Xingjian's. They really look alike. It was a pity that through Feng Xingjian's heaven's perception, he could tell that the other party did not have any heartbeat or breathing. Feng Xingjian looked straight at the ice coffin with an extremely complicated expression. He stood there in a daze, as if he was in a daze. Is this my mother? 10 minutes later, a plasma longsword appeared in void space with a flash, piercing toward the back of Feng Xingjian's head together with a black-clothed warrior. This black-clothed warrior was the person in charge of the base. He was a level 29 Magic Prince warrior and also possessed the powerful ability to teleport. As Feng Xingjian had been in a daze for too long, the black-clothed warrior had immediately discovered this intruder. He approached the other party carefully and then activated teleportation through the wall, wanting to deal Feng Xingjian with a single sword attack. From the looks of it, everything seemed to be very successful. The plasma longsword got closer and closer to Feng Xingjian, while Feng Xingjian continued to stare at the ice coffin in a daze, showing no reaction. The black-clothed warrior's eyes were filled with excitement. Has his mind wandered? Has his mind really wandered off? It's no wonder. After all, this is his own mother. It'd be strange if he didn't wander off after seeing such a scene. The black-clothed warrior thought of the commotion that Feng Xingjian had caused across the entire world, and then thought of the outcome of him killing Feng Xingjian with a single sword attack. The black-clothed warrior grew increasingly excited. At the next moment, the plasma longsword was already very close to Feng Xingjian's scalp. It was only when a few strands of Feng Xingjian's hair had been swept off that Feng Xingjian tapped out with a finger. A sword finger appeared strangely on the black-clothed warrior's forehead in a flash. A soft, crisp sound rang out, and the black-clothed warrior's body suddenly came to a stop. He lifted his head and looked in Feng Xingjian's direction, saying, "Good sword arts." This sword attack contains unrivaled sword intent and unrivaled sword force, destroying the opponent both physically and mentally. It's true that you have the right to challenge Madame Li Shuanghua. I shouldn't have challenged you. I'm the person in charge of this laboratory. My name is... With a sound, the light pursuit sword ripples slashed the black-clothed man's throat. Feng Xingjian said calmly, "You're too weak. Even if you tell me your name, I won't be able to remember it. It's better for you to leave quietly." A hint of unwillingness flashed in the black-clothed man's eyes. However, this only lasted for 1 to 2 seconds before he collapsed completely. Both his consciousness and physical body had been killed. Feng Xingjian looked at the ice coffin before him, and his eyes were filled with grief. He suddenly thought of things that had happened many hours later. He thought of how he had been bullied since he was young, how he had been alone and without anyone to rely on, and how he had been without parents. With a sigh, Feng Xingjian instructed Tyrant, "Keep it in the gates of the netherworld." After finding his mother's corpse, Feng Xingjian had not thought of what to do with it. He only wanted to place it in the gates of the netherworld for now. However, just as he was about to do this, another vortex suddenly blossomed in the center of the ice coffin. In that instant, the entire ice coffin and the corpse were sucked into it. "Who is it?" Feng Xingjian glared. An overwhelming sword intent swept out in all directions. Tyrant also gasped. "It's the gates of the netherworld." The other party has also performed the gates of the netherworld. At the next moment, a black-clothed man suddenly appeared at the spot where the ice coffin had disappeared. Looking at the other party's silhouette, Fang Xingjian's countenance changed. It was because this black-clothed man was the one who had bestowed him the purple flames back at the Fang clan. Fang Xingjian said coldly, "Who are you? Why did you snatch away my mother's corpse?" Fang Xingjian tried to use his heaven's perception to scan the other party's body. However, he could only sense a stretch of pitch-black darkness and was unable to read anything. The black-clothed man looked at Fang Xingjian and said calmly, "Come and look for me after you've swept through Earth and become the Empire's #1. I'll be waiting for you in the City of Universal Truth." The City of Universal Truth was the headquarters of the Holy See of Truth, the #1 influence in Miracle World. It was the holy city of the Holy See of Truth, the City of Agreements. Fang Xingjian asked anxiously, "Who on earth are you?" "You know who I am." The man did not say another word. With a series of spatial fluctuations, he disappeared completely. Simultaneously, in the center of a huge ice cave below the North Pole's ice sheet, the physical body of the Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, floated in midair. His skin and flesh kept on moving up and down, exuding layers of green light. Below him, Li Shuanghua wore a grim expression as she carefully repaired Fang Yueming's body. However, the crucial thing was that Fang Yueming's brain had also been seriously injured by Fang Xingjian. There were over 10 billion nerve cells in the brain, and there were even more other tissues in the brain. Even though Li Shuanghua was a divine-level expert, it was still a great project for her to repair the several 10 billion cells in another person's body, as well as to accurately restore the various electrical signals and chemical reactions. After all, although Magic Prince warriors who had transitioned into divine-level experts had the support of diabolic energy and could perform all sorts of special diabolic abilities, possessing extraordinary powers that were even stronger than those of knights. However, in terms of the development of the human body, they did not have the specialty seeds, brain regeneration, or ether organs that knights had. Furthermore, she was afraid of being disturbed by others. This was why she had come under the North Pole's ice sheet and spent 2 days and 2 nights to barely pull Fang Yueming back from the gates of hell. However, despite this, she had only managed to hold onto his life temporarily. She would still need to spend a lot more effort before she could recover. Chapter 499. Just as Li Shuanghua was desperately trying to treat her son, a figure walked out slowly from outside the ice cavern. It was a young man with silver hair, wearing a white battle suit and a pair of black sunglasses. The young man looked at Li Shuanghua and said, "Hee, old Madame Fang, it seems that ever since you gave the Federation the order 12 hours ago, you haven't contacted the outside world. You probably don't know what's happening in the outside world, right?" Li Shuanghua turned to look at the silver-haired young man. He came from the Ford clan, which was one of the 5 great clans, and was known as the Thunder Monarch. He was also one of the 5 divine-level experts. He was also the youngest amongst the 5. Hearing the Thunder Monarch's words, Li Shuanghua said calmly, "Did that rebellious grandson of mine do something shameful again? However, our Fang clan will handle our own matters. After I've treated Ming-Er, I'll personally head over to suppress that vile spawn. There's no need for you to worry." The Thunder Monarch said with a smile, "I'm afraid that we'll only be able to suppress him if the 2 of us join forces." "The 2 of you joining forces? What kind of joke is that?" Li Shuanghua sneered, frowning. She was a divine-level expert. For her to personally suppress her own grandson, she had already become the laughingstock of the various clans. If she were to join forces with the Thunder Monarch, it would be a complete disgrace to all of them. However, the Thunder Monarch shook his head. "You better take a look at this first." The Thunder Monarch took out a silvery white sphere. At the next moment, the sphere shot out streams of light onto the ice wall, playing the scene of Fang Xingjian jumping off the ground and flying out of the atmospheric layer. Moreover, this scene had been edited, combining most of the scenes circulating on the internet and adding in images taken by satellites, making the entire scene appear even clearer and smoother. This is what Fang Xingjian did 12 hours ago. The Federation has already given in to him for now. It said that he has just broken into your base on the small island in the Pacific Ocean and obtained your daughter's corpse, the Thunder Monarch said slowly. Right now, the Earth Federation has secretly entered a state of global preparation for war. After all, neither they nor we can tolerate an overlord suddenly appearing above us. What do you think? Li Shuanghua closed her eyes. Her face was as calm as an ancient well, like a nun who had been meditating for many years. I didn't expect that vile spawn to be so talented. In just a short 2 years, he actually managed to cultivate a world-shaking sword technique. It's a pity that you don't know how to be loyal to your family despite possessing such power. Instead, you harm your elders and rebel against the Federation. With that, Li Shuanghua took a deep breath and said, "Since his battle strength has reached this level, we naturally need to join forces. However, since we've joined forces, we must pursue the greatest certainty. What do the others think?" A look of surprise flashed across the Thunder Monarch's face. He had not expected that the inflexible, stern, and unreasonable old woman in his heart would agree to join forces so easily. "I don't know where Tiandao and Titan have gone to in Miracle World. The despot is willing to join us, but that black devil wants half of your daughter's corpse after everything is done." Li Shuanghua's eyes suddenly opened, and there seemed to be a flash of cold light in them. However, as she looked at her badly mutilated son and thought of Fang Xingjian's performance in the video, she held back the fury in her heart and said, "Getting a divine-level expert to take action. This price is considered normal." The Thunder Monarch smiled. "All right, then it's settled. Make your preparations. The Federation will need to gather their forces once again. We'll take action 1 month later. With 3 divine-level experts, the Federation's core forces, and our Ford clan's secret weapon, will definitely be able to successfully suppress him." The Thunder Monarch's body slowly faded away, but he was thinking about how Fang Xingjian was able to improve so rapidly within a short 2 years, even possessing power that could rival or even surpass that of a divine-level expert at level 29. "It's fine. After I capture you, I'll analyze you bit by bit." 2 hours later, Li Shuanghua sent out a letter to challenge Fang Xingjian, agreeing to have a battle in the Sahara Desert 1 month later. This piece of news was earth-shattering, causing the eyeballs of countless people to explode. The 5 divine-level experts had always been seen as the top-notch battle prowess across the entire Earth. They were the Dark Sovereigns hiding behind the scenes. Although Fang Xingjian had sent the entire Earth Defense's headquarters flying with a single sword attack, there was still a debate as to who was stronger between him and the divine-level experts. Right now, Li Shuanghua, a veteran divine-level expert, was about to challenge Fang Xingjian. This caused countless people to feel excited, and they looked forward to the outcome of this battle. This was especially the case where Fang Xingjian and Li Shuanghua should both be from the Fang clan, yet they had gotten into a fight that would not end until one of them was dead. The feuds between the clans and the grudges between them attracted the curiosity of countless people. At the top floor of the Fang clan's building, Fang Xingjian's legs were circling as he floated in midair. Tyron stood where he was like a prostrating ferocious beast, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws at Fang Xingjian. It was as if he was continuing to increase his aura and power, as if he would be able to deal a fatal blow to Fang Xingjian at any moment. Indistinctly, it was as if the roars of a myriad of dragons could be heard in the air. The indistinct roars kept on rising and falling, as if there were a myriad of beasts charging over. In the entire Fang clan's building, countless people suddenly panicked and felt agitated. There was even a faint feeling of terror that kept on appearing in their hearts. It was as if there were some huge beasts hiding in the darkness, ready to pounce out and bite them at any moment. Compared to Tyron's rising aura, Fang Xingjian appeared very calm, not showing any signs of his aura at all. However, in reality, she was currently engaged in a contest of martial wills with Tyrant. Their sword intense and fist intense kept on clashing and exchanging blows in void space. Wills against wills, concepts against concepts kept on clashing, causing cold sweat to break out incessantly on Tyron's head. Suddenly, he let out a furious bellow and took 3 steps back, saying, "I'm not fighting anymore. This sword intent of yours is too sharp. It's making my head hurt." Seeing how calm Fang Xingjian was, Tyron suddenly said, "Are you confident in this duel? I don't think that grandmother of yours is someone who would fight fairly. I'm 100% confident that I'll be able to win against her. However, if I want to sweep through the Federation, I'll still need greater power." Fang Xingjian put out his sword fingers, and a faint sword-shaped phantom image appeared around him. In Tyron's eyes, it exuded an extraordinary spiritual glow. Fang Xingjian continued, "Let's try combining our bodies first. If we succeed, it'll be able to increase our battle prowess greatly. After all, the only thing I can rapidly improve in is my sword arts. Specialty seeds, physical particles, brain regeneration, and ether organs aren't things that can be done in a short period of time." Tyrant walked up with a twisted expression and said, "Don't use this move unless it's absolutely necessary." A few minutes later, their figures merged together, and Tyrant's body could be seen covering Fang Xingjian's body like layers of mercury. It was as if he had become another layer of skin for Fang Xingjian. Not only that, but he had even seeped into the heavenly abyss annihilation armor, directly linking up with Fang Xingjian's body. At the next moment, the auras of over 1,440 specialty seeds rose up from Fang Xingjian's body. Chapter 500. The fusion between Tyrant and Fang Xingjian was the result of Tyrant using his unique body structure to imitate the heavenly abyss annihilation armor, sticking onto Fang Xingjian's body like armor. There might not seem to be any difference, but Tyrant had engulfed the physical body of a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection. After merging into Fang Xingjian's body, Fang Xingjian was able to draw out the power from the 1,440 specialty seeds. With this fusion, Fang Xingjian felt as if endless power was gushing out from void space, and the vital energy and blood in his body seethed like a great river. At this moment, Fang Xingjian felt as if his physical strength had increased by 10 or even 100 times. Endless power was gushing out from the many specialty seeds in his body, making him feel extremely exhilarated. With a light step, waves of air currents were generated in the air, and his entire person had already flown a distance of 10 kilometers. He took another step, and as his body cut through the air, thunderous sounds rang out, and he was already several thousand meters high in the sky. As expected, after we fused together, my physical strength increased crazily. It's even above that of ordinary demigods with 2 tiers of perfection. My physical strength has increased tremendously. Coupled with my original sword arts cultivation, my battle prowess on Earth has also become stronger. However, I still need to become even stronger. Thinking of his opponent this time around, surging negative emotions surged in Fang Xingjian's heart. In this battle, no matter what moves his opponent performed or what arrangements they made, he would not allow himself to fail. Just then, Tyrant said, "All right, let's remove the fusion first." Fang Xingjian asked, "Aren't you going to get used to it?" "The hell with getting used to it," Tyrant said angrily, "tribing together with a guy with your entire body sticking together. This won't do. I'm going to puke." Where are you going to puke in your current state?" "I don't know either, but I feel that I can't hold it in anymore." In the sky, Fang Xingjian looked at the ground under his feet and sank into deep thought. He was constantly condensing his specialty seeds, and he was also tempering his martial will without stopping for a single moment. However, if he wanted to improve his combat power qualitatively in the next month, it would be too late to use ordinary methods. At this moment, Fang Xingjian's eyes suddenly flashed as he looked at a street dozens of kilometers away. On the street, dozens of desperados armed with machetes had forced a young man into a corner. The bearded leader shouted, "Kid, Do you know who's protecting this street? How dare you ruin our business? If I don't take one of your arms today, we won't be able to live on this street anymore." The young man said angrily, "Who can't stop a bunch of thieves from stealing? You better think this through. Stealing will only result in arrest. If you dare to cut me today, all of you will go to jail. Yo, kid, you're quite arrogant. Kill him. Let's see if he still dares to be so arrogant. We'll take one of his arms, and he'll know fear." In that instant, over 10 people charged forth, and the young man barely managed to fend off a few attacks. He was already covered in blood, and at the next moment, a machete came slashing down toward his face. It was clear that they wanted to kill him. Faced with this slash that was coming down toward his face, the young man's mind suddenly went blank. An unprecedented terror filled his mind, causing his body to turn numb. His muscles twitched, and the blood throughout his body flowed down at a rapid speed. However, at the next moment, the long saber broke, and Feng Xingjian was already standing before him. No one present had been able to see how Feng Xingjian had appeared before them. It was even more impossible for these minor characters at the bottom of the social hierarchy to know who Feng Xingjian was. The bearded man said in surprise and doubt, "And who are you? Are you going to protect this kid?" Feng Xingjian did not look at him. Instead, he turned to look at the young man, sensing the terror in the latter's heart. This is the fear of life and death. It might also be the greatest fear humans have. Looking at Feng Xingjian's appearance, the bearded man let out a cold laugh and said, "Another one who's putting on an act. Brothers, slash him to death." However, at the next moment, an eerie sword intent swept out, and the sounds of machetes dropping onto the ground rang out incessantly. All the machete-wielding men had turned into vegetables and were lying on the ground. The bearded man let out an agonizing cry as if he had seen a ghost. With a bang, he dropped to his knees. How could he not know that he had met with an expert? Say, "Sir, please spare my life." However, when he lifted his head to look, there was no sign of Feng Xingjian. Then he felt a pain in his chest. He did not know when it had happened, but a large hole had appeared in his chest, and blood was gushing out like water. Sensing the fear the bearded man had before his death, Feng Xingjian came to a realization. If I wish to further temper my martial will, I'll probably have to rely on the fear of life and death. What was the most terrifying thing in the world? Different people might have different answers, but the most common answer would probably be death. That was the instincts of living creatures and humans. It was something that everyone was most unwilling to face, yet it was something that they had no choice but to face. In the following 1 month, Feng Xingjian started all sorts of attempts. There was only one goal: to get close to death and use the threat of death to force out his potential. He wanted to further temper his will and complete his 5th god-slaying sword. At the beginning, he put himself in danger. He plunged down from a height of 100,000 meters, smashing out a huge crater. He entered a trench that was several tens of thousands of meters deep into the sea. In the pitch-black deep sea, he faced the terrifying water pressure to temper his sword arts. He jumped into volcanic magma and went deep underground, watching as the rocks strata engulfed and pressed down on him bit by bit. He soaked himself in liquid nitrogen, feeling his body temperature gradually decrease, and his heartbeat became increasingly slower. He did not inform anyone to assist him. It was because that would mean that he would lose the trial of the threat of death. After that, the various powers on Earth were no longer able to make him feel any danger. Therefore, he changed his method. He moved around the battlefield, watching as many bullets and cannonballs took away one life after another. "Who are you?" A soldier looked at Feng Xingjian, who was moving around the battlefield like a ghost, and bellowed, "Stop there! Don't move!" However, at the next moment, Feng Xingjian had already disappeared before his eyes, just like a real ghost. He came to the slums and saw many numb and despairing gazes. He saw many emaciated figures collapsing on the hospital beds, calmly facing death. An old man looked at Feng Xingjian, who had suddenly appeared before him in a daze. He saw that Feng Xingjian was floating slightly on the ground, with streams of sword light wrapping around him like wings. The old man could not help but ask, "Are you an angel?" Looking at the old man's final smile, Fang Xingjian dissipated into the air, witnessing death, and observing death. During the last few days, the deathly aura on Fang Xingjian's body got increasingly stronger. He looked like a ghost that had come from the netherworld. He went to many hospitals and watched as lives continued to pass away every day. Fury, despair, terror, calmness, numbness. In the face of death, everyone displayed different attitudes. On the last day before the arranged battle, Fang Xingjian came to a rundown hospital, found an empty hospital bed, and lay down on it. Over the past 1 month, he had tried many things, seen many things, and experienced many things. He also had a special understanding of death. However, he was still lacking a little. Fang Xingjian knew that it was time for him to take another step forward. After entering the hospital, it was as if no one could see him wherever he passed by. No one would ask him why he was lying on the hospital bed. Fang Xingjian lay on the hospital bed and slowly closed his eyes. This time around, he was going to face death personally. At the moment he closed his eyes, his breathing became increasingly softer, and his heartbeat became increasingly slower. In the end, it was as if he had completely lost his breath, turning into an ice-cold rock. Chapter 501. Ever since he had entered the second transition, Fang Xingjian's control over his physical body had gotten increasingly stronger. This was especially so after he had successively condensed specialty seeds, stimulated physical particles, and gained an extremely strong regenerative ability. His control over his physical body had reached an unprecedented pinnacle. Right now, by forcefully stopping his heartbeat and breathing, he was extremely close to death. In the face of death, Fang Xingjian could only feel one thing: endless emptiness. Is death emptiness? There's nothing. Eternal darkness. Eternal loneliness. There's nothing. In fact, even consciousness is. Just as his consciousness started to dissipate, streams of sword intense suddenly shot out. Fang Xingjian's physical body was close to death, but he forced himself to stay awake by relying on the toughness of his martial will. This feeling was like a person who had run for 1,000,000 kilometers and yet was still forcing himself to continue running. It was impossible for a person to run for 1,000,000 kilometers, and it was even more impossible to continue running after running for 1,000,000 kilometers. Right now, Fang Xingjian was relying on his unbelievably tough sword intense to maintain his consciousness despite the fact that his heartbeat had stopped, his breathing had stopped, and his physical body was on the verge of death. I absolutely cannot die. I want to seek revenge. I want Li Shuanghua to kneel down and admit her wrongs. I want to find out about my mother. I want to understand what on earth is going on. I still want to attain the divine level. I want to see the greater heights of sword arts. I must not die. Accompanied by the tug-of-war between death and consciousness, Fang Xingjian's sword intense started to grow at an unbelievable rate. He was using death to force himself to become stronger. As Fang Xingjian's sword intense continued to grow, the Heaven's Volition sword intent that had been hidden in his body all this while also started to tremble. This sword intent, which had been created by an unknown divine-level expert, seemed to finally be about to unleash its true powers when faced with Fang Xingjian's increasingly stronger cultivation. Just as Fang Xingjian was immersed in the depths of death and comprehending it, he was using the terror of life and death to temper his martial will so that he could attain further breakthroughs. Li Shuanghua's side was also constantly moving. The first thing he did was to shrink all of the overseas laboratories and then withdraw all of the Fang clan's cash, freezing up the Fang clan's cash flow. Fang Yuehe was extremely busy, and the Fang clan's operations had almost come to a complete standstill. If this was just to let the Fang family members re-recognize Li Shuanghua's control over the Fang family, then what Li Shuanghua did next was to threaten them with force. At the end of February 2037, a giant mushroom cloud rose in the desert northwest of Exile. The blazing light almost illuminated the sky within a radius of several hundred kilometers. Chaotic electromagnetic waves filled the sky above the entire Earth, announcing the release of mankind's most powerful force. In the center of the mushroom cloud, within the death domain where light and heat interweaved, a figure stepped out. In the launch site several tens of kilometers away, the Thunder Monarch's brows were tightly knitted together. Beside him, an adjutant exclaimed, "She's out! She's out!" She actually withstood a 50-megaton warhead. Hurry up and check her physical condition. Where's the rescue team? Hurry up and go up. No, the temperature is too high. I can't go up at all. The magnetic field is in a mess. Our detectors have all failed. She seems to be coming over. There's an object approaching at high speed. At the next moment, the ground that was 10 meters thick above the launch site was torn apart, and Li Shuanghua, who was charred black, appeared in the sky. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that her hair, skin, muscles, and other parts of her body were all regrowing. She seemed to have become younger and more delicate. Looking at the terrified crowd, Li Shuanghua said calmly, "Give me a coat." The Thunder Monarch looked at Li Shuanghua with a grim countenance and said, "You've attained a breakthrough?" Li Shuanghua said calmly, "From today onward, I'm the strongest on Earth." When she said this, her tone was calm, but it was as if it was a matter of course. It was as if she was saying something common sense. However, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Thankfully, I managed to get in contact with the first prince half a year ago. Fang Qian has also sent over the ancient path of hell's research information. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to successfully imitate a knight's power and achieve the final breakthrough." The green-robed Magic Prince faction was most proficient in imitating and integrating all abilities. The Thunder Monarch's countenance turned even more grim, but he was unable to say anything. Nuclear weapons had always been mankind's ultimate weapons. Even divine-level experts had never had a record of going up against nuclear weapons head-on. Right now, Li Shuanghua had attained another breakthrough in her cultivation. To think that she was able to use her physical strength to go up against a nuclear weapon with a yield of 50 megatons. This meant that there were no longer any weapons on Earth that could harm her. If Fang Xingjian's previous performance had made everyone want to kill him by all means possible, slaying this retired emperor who had been suppressing them, then the power that Li Shuanghua displayed now made the Federation's upper echelon feel helpless. They were like gods who could not summon any will to resist. The difference between a retired emperor and a god was naturally huge. Within a few days, the news of Li Shuanghua going up against a nuclear weapon with a yield of 50 megatons with her physical body spread out. The various influences were in an uproar, and a large number of Fang clan's members once again sought refuge with Li Shuanghua. Countless countries and influences expressed their goodwill towards Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua's limelight immediately overshadowed that of the remaining 4 divine-level experts and Fang Xingjian. There were even some busybodies who suggested that Li Shuanghua was now the #1 in the world. As the date of the duel drew closer, Li Shuanghua's reputation grew increasingly great. Later on, she paid a visit to several tens of great clans and organizations on Earth. With her terrifying physical strength, she connected all these great influences together and almost became the leader of the 5 divine-level experts. She then received an audience with Xian Country's president and White Eagle Country's president. Her reputation was so great that she was like the sun in the sky, almost becoming a legend. In the entire Federation, her words were practically of enormous weight. The title of #1 in the world spread like wildfire. On the other hand, Fang Yuehe was only left with a few people. Even Fang Xingjian had gone missing for many days, with no traces of him to be found. On the day of the duel, Fang Yuehe had just gotten off the plane when he sensed the omnipresent gazes looking at him. He lifted his head and saw that the entire airport was filled with people. This duel had attracted too many people's gazes, and as Fang Yuehe was on Fang Xingjian's side, he was the target of countless people's gazes. However, most of these gazes were filled with mockery, pity, and gloating. Ever since the news of Li Shuanghua's participation in the nuclear bomb experiment spread out, Feng Yuehe had gradually gotten used to such gazes. That very night, his hair had even turned white, and his gaze no longer had the confidence and arrogance he had in the past. There was only an endless sense of loss, not knowing what he should do next. Chapter 502. A nuclear bomb with a yield of 50 megatons was one of the highest-grade nuclear bombs that could be chosen in the current testing situation. It was equivalent to 1% of the power of the sun. One shot was enough to destroy the entire demonic city, turning everything within a 15-kilometer radius into ashes and a 30-kilometer radius into ruins. The mushroom cloud produced by the explosion was 40 kilometers wide and 60 kilometers high, 7 times higher than Mount Everest. The hot air it produced could inflict level 3 burns on people 170 kilometers away. The flash produced by the explosion can cause burns and even cataracts and blindness to witnesses 200 kilometers away. The hurricane he produced had a pressure of 100 kilograms per square meter and could blow 1,000 kilometers. Because of this explosion, the Eurasian continent was pushed to the south by 9 millimeters. One had to know that the nuclear bombs that were commonly used in intercontinental missiles only had a yield of about 500,000 to 1 million tons. A nuclear bomb with a yield of 50 megatons could destroy any target on Earth. Such an ultimate weapon was blocked by Li Shuanghua, just like that, and at the very center of the explosion. At the thought of this, Feng Yuehe felt a chill run down his spine. He could not think of any other way to kill Li Shuanghua. Obviously, the others thought the same. Therefore, right now, Feng Yuehe, who had rushed over to watch the battle, was alone. He looked extremely miserable, completely different from how he had been a month ago when he was surrounded by people. Even until the day of the duel, he still hadn't contacted Feng Xingjian, so he hadn't slept more than 2 hours for the past 3 days. There were all kinds of rumors in the outside world. Some said that Feng Xingjian had escaped, some said that he had apologized to Li Shuanghua, and some even said that he could not bear the pressure and committed suicide. In short, there was nothing good to say. As Feng Yuehe walked out of the airport, a row of people suddenly blocked his way. It was the Feng clan's third son, Feng Yueming. Right now, he was seated in a wheelchair with his head tilted to one side. His entire body was covered in bandages, and his eyes were filled with a morbid hatred. Pushing the wheelchair behind him was Hua Mimi, Feng Yueming's wife, who had been crippled by Feng Xingjian. She was looking at Feng Yuehe with a mocking gaze. Some time ago, she was picked up by Li Shuanghua, but no one dared to stop her. Looking at Feng Xingjian's astonished gaze, Feng Yueming gritted his teeth and said, "Second brother, you didn't expect this, right? I'm still alive?" Feng Yuehe let out a breath and said, "Third brother, it's good that you're alive. As long as I'm alive? Do I look alive to you?" Feng Yueming grinned and said, "You think that you could become the clan head, but you didn't expect that Feng Xingjian is completely unreliable, right? How does it feel to climb to the top of the clouds, only to be pulled down again?" Hua Mimi also said, "Second uncle, you went astray this time and angered the old lady. I think you'd better think about how to appease her when the time comes." With that, the two of them laughed out loud and left, leaving behind a desolate Feng Yueming, who was filled with terror. He sighed and continued to walk towards the location of the duel. No matter what, with Li Shuanghua's current power, he had nowhere to run. He thought to himself that no matter what, he was still Li Shuanghua's son. At most, he would be banished from the core of the family. It was impossible to kill him. By the time he arrived at the center of the Sahara Desert, Li Shuanghua was already standing on a sand dune with her eyes closed. She stood there with her arms folded across her chest. There was not the slightest breeze within a radius of 1 kilometer, and there was not a single speck of dust flying in the air. Even the temperature did not seem to change. The countless spectators were basically all standing several tens of kilometers away from Li Shuanghua. The destructive prowess of a divine-level expert was far too great. Even though many of the spectators were experts, no one was willing to get close to the battlefield. They were basically using their special abilities, telescopes, detectors, or satellites to observe this duel from afar. After Fang Yuehe arrived at the battlefield, he found a random place to stay. He did not dare to meet his mother. One reason was that Li Shuanghua had been very strict since young, and her upbringing was extremely strict. This caused Fang Yuehe to be extremely fearful of his mother since young. Another reason was that ever since Li Shuanghua was acclaimed as the strongest expert on Earth, the #1 expert in the world, she had established connections with all the great clans and organizations on Earth. She had also received the recognition of the 5 great countries in the world, and her reputation had reached an unbelievable level. Just as Fang Yuehe was thinking about these, he heard an extremely imposing voice ringing out from the horizon. It was seething like the might of the heavens. "Unfilial son, since you're here, why aren't you kowtowing and admitting your mistakes?" Fang Yuehe's countenance changed. At the next moment, he felt a majestic, seemingly endless, yet omnipresent power extending out from void space. With a tug, it traversed a distance of over 10 kilometers and pulled him right before Li Shuanghua. At the next moment, an intense pain came from his knee, and Fang Yuehe dropped to his knees. Fang Yuehe's eyes immediately turned bloodshot as he knelt down before so many experts on Earth. He said, "Mother, must you do something like this before so many people?" "Humph." Li Shuanghua let out a cold snort, not caring about Fang Yuehe's fury at all. She said coldly, "Unfilial son, you colluded with that vile spawn and even wanted to snatch away the Fang clan's assets. You still have the cheek to come here today?" At this moment, Fang Yuehe seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and did not care about Li Shuanghua's might at all. He said, "Mother, I'm also your son. Do you only have eyes for third brother? What's wrong with me wanting to take control of the Fang clan? That's because you don't know your own limitations. Xingqian's talent will surpass mine in the future and bring the Fang clan to greater heights. Since that's the case, you should put away your petty thoughts and focus on opening up a path for him in the future. Who would have thought that you're so stupid that you can't be saved to be together with that vile spawn?" Li Shuanghua said in disdain. "That vile spawn has become arrogant and conceited just because of a small fortuitous encounter. Do you really think that he'll be able to succeed? You're really short-sighted. Just based on this point alone, the Fang clan can't be handed over to you." Fang Yuehe felt increasingly indignant. He wanted to stand up and open his mouth to speak again, but he felt waves of great power gushing toward him from void space. His entire body was completely suppressed by the will of a divine-level expert, and he could not move at all. He could not even speak a single word. This feeling made Fang Yuehe feel extremely aggrieved. Li Shuanghua said, "Today, you can just kneel here and reflect on your actions. After I've dealt with that vile spawn, you can follow me back to Demonic City. From today onward, don't bother about the clan's matters." After hearing Li Shuanghua's words, the courage that Fang Yuehe had just mustered up seemed to have dissipated in an instant. It was as if all of his spirit, qi, and spirit had been sucked out in that instant, and his eyes were filled with despair and perplexity. He knew that from today onward, he would probably only be able to eat and wait for death. He would no longer have any fate with the authority of the clan. Simultaneously, in a group over 10 kilometers away, Tyrant had taken the form of Caucasian man and was hiding there. He frowned. "Damn, this old woman seems to have become even more powerful. I wonder if Xinjiang will be able to fend her off." Countless people were looking forward to this world-shaking battle. There were not only people who had come to watch the battle, but there were also countless cameras shining in Li Shuanghua's direction, carrying out a live broadcast across the internet. The spy satellites of a few countries kept on scanning the area, reporting the situation to their superiors at all times. However, from morning to noon, and from noon to night, Fang Xingjian did not appear at all. Everyone's expressions became increasingly impatient. Could it be that Fang Xingjian has escaped? If I were him, I wouldn't dare to come either. This coward. He's fooled the entire world. Just as there were more and more complaints, and all sorts of people thought that Fang Xingjian had stood him up. A loud and clear cry of a baby rang out in the hospital ward. Fang Xingjian's eyes opened abruptly. The end of life is death, and the end of death is life. Chapter 503. After his physical body had been dead for almost 1 day and 1 night, when Fang Xingjian was woken up by the cries of an infant, his consciousness awakened from a state of chaos. His heart started to beat once again, his blood started to flow once again, his lungs started to breathe, and his brain started to work again bit by bit. At this moment, Fang Xingjian suddenly had an extremely deep understanding of death. In his eyes, death seemed to no longer be terrifying. Simultaneously, the Heaven's Volition sword intent in his mind also became completely active, turning into a black sword edge that encompassed his entire body. Ever since he had obtained the Heaven's Volition sword intent, Fang Xingjian knew that as his cultivation grew, he would be able to unleash more and more of the Heaven's Volition sword intent's powers. This time around, when he had faked his death to train, the Heaven's Volition sword intent had gone through even more changes. Heaven's Volition, the survival of the fittest. Right now, Fang Xingjian had an even deeper understanding of the Heaven's Volition sword intent. He knew that the unique aspect of the Heaven's Volition sword intent was that it could continue to grow with time. As long as he continued to absorb new sword techniques and sword theories, he would be able to continue to adapt, evolve, and become increasingly stronger. Right now, as Fang Xingjian's comprehension of death and the tempering of his martial will, the Heaven's Volition sword intent had also evolved once. It had turned into a black sword edge that was filled with the aura of death, loneliness, and emptiness. Fang Xingjian believed that if he were to activate the Heaven's Volition sword intent now, its prowess would no longer be the same as before. As for the real reason why Fang Xingjian was cultivating in the face of death, the 5th God-slaying sword, death was the end of a person's time. The consciousness of a dead person would be equivalent to jumping out from the river of time. They would no longer be able to affect history, and history would no longer be able to affect them either. It would only be when they returned to this world that they would once again enter the river of time. After integrating the profoundness of infiltrating void, light pursuit, and all-conquering, as well as using his comprehension of life and death and time as the framework, Fang Xingjian had finally succeeded in cultivating the 5th God-slaying sword. The instant of life and death. All the changes between life and death, as well as the process of entering and leaving the river of time, are all in that instant. This sword will be called Instant. A black sword intent surged out from Fang Xingjian's body. As this power spread out, the birds in the sky froze in midair. The rays of the sun became distorted, the clouds became still, and the air turned into a stagnant barrier. It was as if the entire world had come to a standstill. When the black blade slashed past Fang Xingjian, the wall in front of him was completely torn apart. The 5th God-slaying sword could insert a new sword in time. When this sword slashed out, it was as if time had stopped. After this sword slashed out, time flowed again. Or rather, it could be said that he had inserted a sword into the river of time that did not originally exist. Naturally, during this process, Fang Xingjian could only unleash a single slash. He could not do anything else. Moreover, this slash could only be unleashed within a 100-meter radius. The instant sword truly came from nowhere and left without a reason. It was a sword that was executed in an impossible situation. It was also a sword that could not be dodged or defended against. After completing this sword attack, Fang Xingjian's expression was one of extreme elation and satisfaction. This sword attack relied purely on his sword arts cultivation, which meant that his sword arts cultivation had reached a certain pinnacle. If he were to activate the Heaven's Volition sword intent and then perform the instant sword attack, the prowess would definitely be even more terrifying. The black sword intent on his body disappeared with a flash, and with a single step, Fang Xingjian appeared before a nurse. The nurse was about to call for a doctor when she felt her mind sink. She said in a daze, "It's 11:50 p.m. on the 1st of March. Oh, Does this mean that I'm late? At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian disappeared once again with a flash. Fang Xingjian soared into the air, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at the stratosphere. After this 1 month of tough cultivation, not only had his martial will and sword arts cultivation improved tremendously, his other aspect had also improved tremendously. Both his specialty seeds and waves had improved tremendously, and the prodigious astral divine powers waves had already reached level 9. His mental cultivation method, universal sword dominance lunisolar, was seething. Fang Xingjian could sense that as he completely defeated Li Shuanghua this time around, the hatred in his heart would be released, and his mental cultivation method would improve tremendously. Right now, his attributes had become: name, Fang Xingjian; age, 18; occupation, heavenly sword, sovereign level, 29; strength, 206 plus 19; agility, 311 plus 19; reaction, 216; endurance, 197; flexibility, 196; ether synchronization rate. 100%. The attributes above come into effect once the prodigious astral divine powers waves is activated. Due to perfect muscles, plus 19 in strength and agility, 10% of the endurance attribute, techniques, boundaries negation, level 44 god-slaying swords, level 12 ether divine art, white bone divine weapon, heaven's volition sword, and 10 internal specialties, 260 external specialties, 8 waves. Level 9 prodigious astral divine powers waves mental cultivation method. Level 8 universal sword dominance lunisolar. Fang Xingjian's body cut across the cloud layers at high speed. Moving at a speed that was several tens of times that of supersonic speed, he arrived in the sky above the battlefield within a few minutes. Right now, on the battlefield in the Sahara Desert, countless people had waited for over 10 hours and seemed to be getting impatient. There were even people who had started to pack up, planning to leave. How boring. To think that Fang Xingjian backed off. What a joke. Li Shuanghua can even withstand a nuclear missile. Who on earth would be able to take a beating from her? Sigh. I had thought that there would be a battle of the century. I wonder where Fang Xingjian is hiding. Just then, someone pointed toward the eastern horizon and said, "Look, what's that? Is that Fang Xingjian?" Countless people gasped as they looked toward the eastern sky. They saw a long black line piercing through the sky. Wherever it passed by, the cloud layers would be split into two, turning into streams of air currents that gushed out in both directions. Just as everyone noticed this abnormality, a human figure was already standing several hundred meters above Li Shuanghua's head. At the next moment, Fang Xingjian's voice brought along a series of whirlwinds that instantly spread out to a range of 10 lis. It was as if 100,000 thunderbolts had exploded in the sky. Li Shuanghua, you probably didn't expect that there would be a day where I would stand before you and defeat you, right? Li Shuanghua let out a cold laugh and stood up. She looked at Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky, and said, "Valspawn, do you think that you'll be able to fight against me just because you've comprehended some insignificant sword techniques?" Fang Xingjian's gaze was indifferent as he looked at Li Shuanghua. At the next moment, an extremely heavy will that was filled with an aura of death descended from the sky, smashing onto Li Shuanghua's body and colliding with her martial will. At this moment, Li Shuanghua's countenance changed. As their martial wills collided, she felt an extremely heavy feeling, and there was even a threat of death. At this moment, she understood that she was not the only one who had improved. Fang Xingjian's improvement was even more terrifying. Chapter 504. Fang Xingjian continued. Li Shuanghua, as long as you're willing to kneel down and apologize to my mother before the world, I'll let you off. Fang Xingjian spoke calmly, but with Li Shuanghua's character, how could she possibly agree to it? Not only did she not agree to it, but fury flashed in her eyes. Your mother doesn't follow the ways of a woman and has lost her morals. Moreover, she's my daughter, and I was the one who gave her her life. Her body, hair, and skin were given to her by her parents. It's only right and proper for me to take her life. What right does she have to accept my kneeling? Li Shuanghua, let out an explosive bellow and said, "Vile spawn, get down here." With this thunderous bellow, a martial will that was like a green tempest swept out wildly toward the sky. Wherever it passed by, the atmosphere would be compressed into a vacuum, and a power that could destroy a mountain collided fiercely against Feng Xingjian's body. However, it collided fiercely against the pitch-black heaven's volition sword intent on Feng Xingjian's body. Feng Xingjian's sword intent had improved, and the heaven's volition sword intent had evolved. Although it still required potential points to activate, it would now take the initiative to protect Feng Xingjian. Crackling sounds of explosions rang out incessantly. It was the sound of the surrounding air being compressed by the two gushes of martial will. Facing this attack from Li Shuanghua's martial will, the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent took the initiative to protect Feng Xingjian, allowing him to withstand it and remain as steady as Mount Tai. However, Li Shuanghua's attack was not that simple. The explosive bellow was just the beginning. With that explosive bellow, she opened up her 5 fingers and grabbed fiercely at void space. The air within a range of 10 lis seemed as if it had encountered an absolute sovereign, or as if a black hole had suddenly appeared in space. Endless air gushed out wildly toward Li Shuanghua's palm, and in the blink of an eye, it had been compressed into a pure white sphere. Concurrently, her other hand struck out in the direction of Feng Xingjian's location across space. Green light flashed explosively, unleashing a prowess that was even stronger than the explosive bellow from earlier. It clashed against the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent on Feng Xingjian's body, releasing a deafening sound that was like the morning bell and evening drum, ringing out in all directions. This collision caused Feng Xingjian's body to sway slightly, and his expression to change. He was still unaware that Li Shuanghua's cultivation had improved tremendously over the past month after combining the cultivation materials from the ancient path of hell. After 2 consecutive moves, the extremely compressed air in Li Shuanghua's palm had already turned from transparent to white, from white to gray, and from gray to pitch black. This was because as the wind was compressed, countless amounts of water vapor and dust condensed within it. This move was Li Shuanghua's ultimate move in the past, the 9 Heavens Wind Thunder Tribulation. It was said that this move could flatten an area of 10 li. However, this was still not enough. As the 9 Heavens Wind Thunder Tribulation was completed, waves of auras of sulfur and lava started to appear on Li Shuanghua's body. It was the aura of hell. She held the 9 Heavens Wind Thunder Tribulation in one hand, while streams of demonic green flames rose from her other hand. They brought with them the aura of sulfur and lava, and also emitted an aura as if hell had descended and the mortal world had fallen. This was another move that Li Shuanghua had invented after imitating and integrating the powers of the ancient path of hell, the 9 earthly flaming air calamity. On one hand was a sovereign who ruled over the atmosphere and controlled strong gales. On the other hand was a demon who descended from hell and fell from the mortal world. Right now, Li Shuanghua's aura had reached an extreme. Under the guidance of a tremendous force, the sand in the surroundings started to fly up into the sky. The people who were watching the battle from several kilometers or over 10 kilometers away were all astonished. It was because they realized that despite being so far away, they were still affected by Li Shuanghua's martial will. Countless people dropped to their knees, their countenances pale. It was as if they had seen the most bloody and terrifying scene in hell. The Thunder Monarch, who was hiding in the dark, wore a complicated expression. What a powerful move. Where did she learn it from? I can sense that once the 2 gushes of powers in her hands explode at the same time, they'll be able to produce an extremely terrifying destructive prowess. Next to him, the Despot, who was over 5 meters tall, wore a grim countenance. He had always been at odds with the Fong clan. Now that he saw how powerful Li Shuanghua was, it was easy to imagine how bad his mood was. He said in a deep voice, "This isn't the martial arts that she had learned in the past. One of them is as deep and ancient as hell, and it has an aura of the netherworld. This feeling, is probably not an original martial art from Earth. Right now, Li Shuanghua wore a proud expression. The two different powers of the atmosphere and hell were combined together. The three special effects of wind, fire, and thunder gathered together, forming a tempest that could destroy everything. At this moment, Li Shuanghua's powers had erupted to a pinnacle. She felt as if her powers could crush the entire earth. However, Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky, appeared indifferent. He merely asked coldly, "Are you done with your preparations?" Li Shuanghua's eyes narrowed. She had not expected that the reason why Fang Xingjian had been standing there and not making a move from the beginning to the end was because he wanted her to continue unleashing her powers to the greatest extent. He wants to defeat me when I'm at my strongest. Li Shuanghua had not thought wrongly. Fang Xingjian wanted to defeat Li Shuanghua at the moment when her aura and powers reached their pinnacle, completely destroying her will. At the thought of this, the fury in her eyes grew even more intense. With a move of her hands, the 9 heavenly wind thunder calamity and the 9 earthly flaming air disaster clashed together fiercely, turning into a tempest that gushed out toward Fang Xingjian. This tempest seemed to have come from hell itself. Wherever it passed by, all the air molecules would be heated up into a plasma state. There was also a feeling that hell had descended, and the mortal world would once again turn into the hellish environment of ancient times. It was as if this gust of tempest from hell was going to blow by. Everything was going to return to the situation several billion years ago when Earth was still a pot of chemical soup. All life no longer existed. This intent that could take away all life was far too powerful. When it suddenly appeared, within a range of over 10 kilometers, countless people who were watching the battle gasped. Some spewed out blood and fell to the ground. Some wore expressions of terror, and some even fainted. At this moment, the power that Li Shuanghua displayed was far too strong. Both her pure physical destructive prowess and her mental destructive prowess had reached an extreme. Fang Yuehe, who was the closest to her, felt especially terrified. He felt like he was a small boat amidst a raging tempest, about to be smashed into smithereens at any moment. The pressure on Fang Xingjian, who was the first to bear the brunt of the attack, was even greater. The Black Heaven's volition sword intent turned into many sword edges, encompassing his body. However, under Li Shuanghua's attacks, the black sword edges melted away rapidly, as if they would completely dissipate at any moment. However, just as everyone thought that Fang Xingjian was going to be defeated, Fang Xingjian finally made his move. The 5th god-slaying sword, Instant, was activated. No one saw what Fang Xingjian's sword move looked like. No one saw where Fang Xingjian's sword attack came from, and no one saw where Fang Xingjian's sword attack ended. There was neither a beginning nor an end. It was as if an extra second had been inserted into the video. In the end, everyone could only see a trace of sword marks split open on Li Shuanghua's neck, and a look of astonishment appeared in Li Shuanghua's eyes. "You!" Before she could finish her words, Li Shuanghua's head soared into the sky, and she had turned into a headless female corpse. Chapter 505. Seeing the scene of Li Shuanghua being beheaded with a single sword attack, everyone present was extremely astonished. They had not expected that Li Shuanghua, who could withstand a nuclear weapon with a yield of 50 megatons, would be killed with a single sword attack just like that. However, just as everyone thought that Li Shuanghua would die just like that, green light flashed incessantly on her body. In the blink of an eye, it once again formed her body. Her entire physical body had been completely reconstructed once again. Violent martial will struck Fang Xingjian's body with a boom, catching Fang Xingjian off guard and sending him flying over 10 kilometers away. Li Shuanghua's violent will was also accompanied by it. Valspawn, do you think that you can win against me just like that? My martial will has long since stepped into the second realm. Other than materializing my will and being able to interfere with the physical world, I can also turn my will into a physical body and reconstruct my own physical body at will. As long as my will doesn't die, my physical body will never die. At the next moment, green light flashed explosively in Li Shuanghua's eyes, and countless explosions took place on the mountain that was over 10 kilometers away, blasting Fang Xingjian and the entire mountain into ruins. Seeing this astonishing scene, everyone present was once again astonished, especially the Thunder Monarch and Despot, who were also divine-level experts. The Thunder Monarch was extremely astonished. Materializing ones will allows one to break through the restraints of the physical body and mind, attaining the divine level. However, we haven't been able to figure out how to improve after that. How on earth did Li Shuanghua improve further? The Despot, who was like a huge black gorilla, stomped on the metal ground, causing it to crack. He gritted his teeth and thought hatefully, "Damn it," turning the will into a physical body. As long as the will doesn't die, the physical body won't die. What kind of joke is this? To think that after one's will is materialized, it can still be raised to such a level? It's no wonder that she can fend off a nuclear missile with a yield of 50 megatons. Green flashes encompassed the entire ground, drowning Fang Xingjian's body completely. Violent pressure gathered on every inch of Fang Xingjian's skin, and the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation Armor let out a series of cries, as if it was going to be turned into scrap at any moment due to the high temperature and explosion. However, just then a will that was filled with killing intent, killing aura, and death came gushing over once again. Is this what you're relying on? Is this your trump card? Li Shuanghua. Too insignificant. At the next moment, the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent was activated. Potential points disappeared at the rate of 100,000 points per second. Two white bone swords had appeared in Fang Xingjian's hands at some point in time. The sword in his right hand slashed out. With the reinforcement from the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent, how powerful would the fourth God-slaying sword, all-conquering, be? Wherever the long sword passed by, the cloud layers, which were over 100 kilometers in length, would be split into two. The sunlight that shone down from the sky was completely cut off, and the green martial was also split apart before Fang Xingjian, like the sea that had been split apart. It was as if nothing in the world would be able to stop the sword. Fang Xingjian dashed forward and was about to appear before Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua let out a wild roar, and a green light burst out, smashing towards Fang Xingjian crazily. Concurrently, the 9 heavenly wind thunder calamity and 9 earthly flaming air disaster were activated simultaneously, turning into a hellish tempest that gushed out toward Fang Xingjian. However, it was still useless. Fang Xingjian's long sword pierced out diagonally, and the green light, which encompassed a range of several kilometers, was slashed into two with a swoosh. A hellish passageway was also slashed out from the hellish tempest. What? Li Shuanghua stared at this scene, as if unable to accept that her attack had been slashed into two by Fang Xingjian. At the next moment, Fang Xingjian had already appeared before Li Shuanghua. The fifth God-slaying sword, Instant, was activated, and Li Shuanghua was once again slashed into two at the waist. Li Shuanghua had just reassembled her body when her head was slashed into minced meat. Fang Xingjian stood before Li Shuanghua, activating Instant again and again. Streams of sword marks exploded before Li Shuanghua, killing her body time and time again. Li Shuanghua let out an enraged bellow and charged out while flashing with green light. However, she was slashed into minced meat by Instant and exploded in midair. She reassembled her body once again and launched an attack with her martial will. Countless wind and thunderbolts descended from the sky, but Fang Xingjian glared at her and activated the light pursuit sword ripples. The wind and thunderbolts were shattered, and Li Shuanghua's head exploded from the several million light pursuit sword ripples. Ah! An ear-piercing scream rang out from void space, turning into waves of ultrasonic waves that could crush mountains and attacking Fang Xingjian. However, the speed of sound was still too slow for Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian swept out with his long sword, and the myriad of sound waves were shattered. Li Shuanghua's body, which had just been formed, exploded once again. In the sky, the green martial seethed. However, this time around, Fang Xingjian did not even give her the chance to reassemble her body. The white bone longsword in his hand pierced out with a swoosh, appearing in the center of the green marshal like a flickering light and passing shadows. With this piercing attack, the Heaven's Volition sword intent turned into a black sword edge and exploded, piercing straight into the green martial will. Li Shuanghua's martial will, which was in midair, suddenly exploded and scattered. It was swept by the black sword intent into fragments. Li Shuanghua's martial will was unable to fend off the invasion of the Heaven's Volition sword intent and Fang Xingjian's sword techniques. She was pushed back in midair, unable to put up any resistance. Many world-shaking and agonizing cries rang out incessantly in void space. However, as Fang Xingjian's sword intents swept out, the glow of the green martial will became increasingly faint, and its volume also became increasingly smaller. In the end, there was only a faint glow that was like that of a firefly. Fang Xingjian watched as Li Shuanghua reassembled her body. However, her vital energy and blood had already deteriorated to an extreme. Not only was she unable to move, but she could not even materialize her will. At the sight of this scene, the Thunder Monarch was astonished. Hang up and beat her up? To think that it's a hang up and beat her up? How can it be a hang up and beat her up? Why is a hang up and beat her up? The despot's mouth was agape, almost unable to close up. He looked at Fang Xingjian and the immobile Li Shuanghua as if he was looking at aliens. As her martial will has improved once again and can even be turned into flesh and blood, Li Shuanghua can even use her physical body to fend off nuclear missiles and use her will to replenish her physical body. She has a body that can fend off a nuclear missile with a yield of 50 megatons. However, under Fang Xingjian's sword, she can't even stand up to a single blow. Damn it, it seems like this guy hasn't even gone all out yet. On the other side of the desert, Fang Yueming sat in a wheelchair while Hua Mimi stood behind it. The two of them stared at the screen before them. The screen was filled with smoke, explosions, and flames, but they were unable to see Fang Xingjian and Li Shuanghua's figures clearly. The two of them had had a large part of their cultivations crippled, and they were unable to see the situation on the battlefield by themselves. Fang Yueming's face was filled with hatred and exhilaration. He could not help but shout, hurry up, and get to the bottom of this. I want to see how tragic that B** starred ends up. However, at the next moment, after the smoke dissipated, Fang Xingjian and Li Shuanghua's figures finally appeared on the screen. However, what astonished everyone was that the person standing right now was Fang Xingjian, while Li Shuanghua was lying on the sand, not moving at all. She only glared at Fang Xingjian with a pair of vengeful eyes. Chapter 506. Looking down at Li Shuanghua, who had fallen to the ground, Fang Xingjian felt exhilarated like never before. The mental cultivation method in his mind continued to circulate rapidly, as if he would attain a breakthrough at any moment. Looking at Li Shuanghua's venomous gaze, Fang Xingjian said calmly, Li Shuanghua, are you still not willing to admit defeat? With Li Shuanghua's personality, how could a divine-level expert, an expert who had cultivated to such a level, possibly admit defeat so easily? Even if a sword or saber were to be placed on her neck, she would not admit defeat so easily. Vile Spawn, you're a traitor and ungrateful. Even if you win by a small margin today, you'll definitely be guilty of many crimes in the future. You won't have a good ending. Fang Xingjian also knew that it was impossible for Li Shuanghua to admit defeat so easily. If she did not have that indomitable and unyielding will, she would not have been able to materialize her will and become a divine-level expert. Therefore, when Fang Xingjian heard this, he merely shook his head. Since you refuse to admit defeat and possess divine-level powers, there's no way I'll let you off so easily. With that, he pointed the bone sword at Li Shuanghua's forehead and said, I'll ask you one more time. If you are willing to admit your mistake and admit defeat to me, and if you are willing to kneel in front of my mother in the morning hall, I will let you go. If you're unwilling, then I'll cripple your cultivation first. Ha ha ha. Li Shuanghua laughed out loud and said, "Vile spawn, do you think that you can threaten me with such a small matter? If you want to cripple me, then so be it. But if you want me to admit defeat and kneel down before Fang Yueru, that rebellious daughter who has humiliated our clan, that's impossible. Moreover, do you think that you're invincible just because you've won against me? There's still the Federation and other divine-level experts on Earth. They won't let you do as you please." "The Federation? Other divine-level experts?" Fang Xingjian smiled. Ignoring Li Shuanghua, who could no longer move, he lifted his head and looked toward the west. At the next instant, his body disappeared abruptly and appeared over 10 kilometers away. He then plunged fiercely toward the ground. With a loud boom, as Fang Xingjian landed fiercely on the ground, endless yellow sand soared into the sky. It was as if several 10,000 kilograms of explosives had been ignited, scattering out in all directions. The people in the surroundings were either knocked unconscious or sent flying. Countless tents, tables, chairs, food, and drinks were overturned and sent flying several kilometers away. There were only 2 people left in the hall, which had been set up like that of an ancient emperor. One of them was the despot, who looked like a chimpanzee, sitting where he was looking coldly at Fang Xingjian. Beside him, the silver-haired and silver-eyed Thunder Monarch let out a low bellow, and countless alloy armors flew over from all directions, assembling onto his body. As the divine-level expert from the Ford clan, who had the greatest technological prowess, the clan's sword. The Fang Xingjians to the Ford. Not only did it have a built-in high-intelligence system, but each piece of the armor was also forged from many layers of special alloys. Even if he was at the bottom of the ocean, in outer space, or even on the moon, he would be able to move about freely without suffering any damage. It contained various weapons such as lasers, missiles, extremely powerful plasma beams, ultrasonic waves, ring-shaped lightning bolts, and so on. It had the destructive prowess of an entire modern mechanized army. As for the Thunder Monarch himself, he was a possessor of yellow faction magic prints. Different from the magic prints of the other colors, the yellow magic prints emphasized a kind of evolution. All of its black magic and magic prince abilities were focused on incessantly stimulating the cultivator's body, allowing the cultivator to continuously evolve. This kind of evolution was very broad, and it was also an evolution that was unique to each person. The powers of any yellow faction magic prince warrior or yellow robe mage would be different based on their mental state, experiences, and personality. This meant that as the powers of any yellow faction magic prince warrior or yellow robe mage continued to evolve, the powers they grasped would be unique and different from the others. They might be similar, but they would definitely not be completely the same. The Thunder Monarch cultivated yellow faction magic prince, and what he kept on evolving was lightning-related abilities. Coupled with the high technological weapons that the Ford clan kept on developing, he possessed astonishing battle prowess. With Fang Xingjian's appearance, the trio's martial wills clashed wildly in the air, and countless thoughts intersected and communicated in that instant. Fang Xingjian, are you crazy? Are you going to fight against the 2 of us alone? The 2 of you better go all out. Otherwise, it would be a great pity for 2 divine-level experts to die under my sword. This lunatic. After a short exchange, both the Thunder Monarch and the Despot knew that there was no way out for them when faced with Fang Xingjian's response. At the next moment, the Thunder Monarch's entire body flashed with electricity, and the alloy armor he wore was fully activated. Over 100 probes lit up simultaneously, and over 100 laser cannons shot out toward Fang Xingjian. The Thunder Monarch had turned his lightning-related abilities into laser beams and shot them out at full power. Just as the over 100 laser cannons landed on Fang Xingjian's body, the Despot, who was like King Kong, moved at the same time. Streams of black magic prints swelled up all over his body. Accompanied by the appearance of these black magic prints, his aura increased crazily, and a phantom image that was over 100 meters tall and looked exactly the same as him rose up behind him. Black Faction Magic Prince and Black Robe Mages had always been considered to be the three factions among the 12 factions of black magic that possessed the strongest battle prowess in head-on battles, along with the Gold Faction and the Silver Faction. Black Faction Magic Prince cultivators would not possess any other extraordinary abilities. The only ability they possessed was that they could engulf other life forms to strengthen their physical body and mental state without limits. Although they did not possess any other extraordinary abilities, with their terrifying physical body and mental state, their battle prowess was extremely terrifying. Simultaneously, due to the fact that they could engulf other life forms to increase their battle prowess, they usually improved very quickly. This was also the reason why Black Faction cultivators like the Despot loved to kill and were temperamental. The Despot suddenly erupted, and the muscles under his skin started to twist like many ancient huge dragons. Before the power from his punches had even landed on Feng Xingjian's body, the surrounding air had already been completely sucked dry. Even the ground under his feet had sunk by an entire meter. The Despot's strength attribute had already reached over 400 points. It was the first time Feng Xingjian had seen such a powerful physical body. Moreover, it was not just his physical body. The extremely massive phantom image behind the Despot, which was over 100 meters tall, was formed from his martial will. The number of phantom images was so great that even Li Shuanghua could not be compared to it. In that instant, both the Thunder Monarch and the Despot joined forces. The two divine-level experts had a deep understanding of how terrifying Feng Xingjian was. They went all out the moment they attacked, and the yellow and black magic prince swelled up at the same time. Over 100 beams of light blasted onto Feng Xingjian's body. Then within 0.001 seconds, the Despot's fists followed up, and the phantom image behind him also struck out from a distance. Violent martial will gushed forth like a spiritual tsunami, wanting to engulf Feng Xingjian's consciousness completely. Faced with such a terrifying siege, Feng Xingjian only unleashed one sword attack. The fifth god-slaying sword, instant. At the next moment, the alloy armor on the Thunder Monarch's chest, which could withstand several 10,000 tons of pressure, exploded abruptly. A hole was blasted through his chest, and he was sent flying out over 100 kilometers. Along the way, he sent the atmosphere and sand dunes flying, and he smashed through countless hills. Chapter 507. After sending the Thunder Monarch flying with a single sword attack, the Despot's fist had just come into contact with Feng Xingjian when the latter had already activated the infiltrating void and stepped into the spatial gaps. However, the Despot's equally violent martial will came smashing down, and a terrifying spiritual tsunami came gushing forth, filling up every inch of the spatial gaps. Endless amounts of information gushed forth, as if wanting to make Feng Xingjian's brain explode completely. However, faced with this terrifying attack, Feng Xingjian slashed out with his sword again unhurriedly, the fourth god-slaying sword, all-conquering. In terms of quantity, your martial will is more than the Thunder Monarch's and Li Shuanghua's combined. However, in terms of quality, it's just something you've gathered by engulfing the spiritual energy of countless people. An all-conquering slashed out from the spatial gaps, splitting the phantom image that was over 100 meters tall into two. The martial will, which was tremendous in quantity and was like a tsunami, was like butter that had encountered a kitchen knife before Feng Xingjian's sword attack. It was sliced into dust, leaving behind only a core mass of black light and a gush of martial will that truly belonged to the Despot. Roar! The heavy mental blow caused the Despot to let out a world-shaking and agonizing cry. Enraged, his muscles swelled up once again, and he turned into a black giant that was over 10 meters tall. He lowered his shoulders, lowered his elbows, and struck out with a punch. Power rose up from his feet, passing through his entire body. Moreover, with the addition of his muscles that were twisting like a tyrannosaurus, the power was magnified crazily. With a single punch, the mountains and rivers seemed to change in color. The clouds in the entire Sahara Desert were swept away, and the weather in Africa changed rapidly. A terrifying sandstorm swept across the entire desert. In a small city at the borders of the Sahara Desert, the originally clear sky instantly darkened. Countless pedestrians stopped in their tracks, looked at the sandstorm that was sweeping toward them, and cried out as they fled in all directions. In the next few tens of minutes, the entire city was drowned by the sandstorm. In Egypt, which was located in the north, all the airports were urgently halted. In the following week, a huge sandstorm wreaked havoc across the entire North Africa. However, this punch, which could cause a magnitude 7 or even 8 earthquake and affect the whole of North Africa, was directly split in front of Feng Xingjian. Starting from the surface of the fist, the despot's wrist, arm, elbow, and shoulder were sliced into two. The massive arm that was 5 meters tall and weighed tens of tons smashed into the ground like a building. With a wild roar, Despot's other fist punched out once again. Amidst the stifled rumbles, Feng Xingjian could even sense that many atoms and molecules had been shattered. Streams of light radiations and explosions came smashing over, accompanied by the brutal fist. This was actually a phenomenon achieved with pure physical strength. Just how terrifying was this physical strength? It was a pity that it was still useless. The all-conquering sword swept out diagonally, and the despot's other arm, which was over 5 meters long and over 2 meters thick, was sent flying with a swoosh. It collided into the ground and sent sand flying up. The spectators in the surroundings started to retreat frantically. Compared to the battle between Li Shuanghua and Feng Xingjian, the despot, who had gone all out, was like a natural disaster creator. His unbridled fist force scattered out, creating a terrifying sandstorm and strong gales. Run! The tornado is coming. Damn it, our car is flipped over. Where's the guide? At the next moment, a sandstorm that was over 1,000 meters tall came gushing over like a tsunami. Everyone was stunned. Quick, run! In the battlefield, over 1 million light pursuit sword ripples gushed toward the despot like tidal waves. The latter was completely drowned for a whole second, and when he reappeared, the black skin all over his body had been peeled off. Only countless muscles and blood vessels could be seen, and he lay on the ground in a half-dead state. The despot bellowed furiously, "Feng Xingjian, you'll die a horrible death. Are you trying to start an all-out war with us?" Feng Xingjian did not reply and merely threw him an indifferent glance. The deathly sword intent struck the despot's head, and Feng Xingjian's voice rang out in his mind. "If you say another word, I'll kill your entire clan." The despot's face was flushed red, and he was so furious that his entire body was trembling. However, under that seemingly material deathly sword intent, he was unable to say a single word. It was because he knew that Feng Xingjian was not joking. If he were to say another word, Feng Xingjian would really kill his entire clan. After crippling the despot temporarily, Feng Xingjian's gaze absorbed countless light waves and looked toward the Thunder Monarch, who was several tens of kilometers away. Right now, the Thunder Monarch's broken alloy armor was emitting streams of plasma flames, and blue plasma was spurting out as if it was free. The Thunder Monarch flew toward the east like a meteor. In the time that Feng Xingjian had taken a glance, the distance between the Thunder Monarch and Feng Xingjian had already exceeded 60 kilometers, and he was still accelerating. If the despot was said to be a strength-type opponent, then the Thunder Monarch was an expert who specialized in ultra-long-range combat. Right now, the Thunder Monarch was planning to escape to Demonic City, to Miracle World. Faced with the Thunder Monarch, who was trying to escape, Feng Xingjian appeared behind Tyrant with a flash. After exchanging information for 0.1 seconds, Tyrant had already encompassed Feng Xingjian's body. In that instant, the auras from the 1,440 specialty seeds soared into the sky, and waves of physical strength seethed in his body like a great river. At the next moment, Feng Xingjian squatted down abruptly. With a loud boom, it was as if the sand under his feet had been slapped by a huge, invisible palm, and the area within a range of 100 meters sunk by 2 meters. The power from Fang Xingjian's legs exploded like a bomb, and a myriad of sand soared into the sky, forming another sandstorm that extended out for several tens of kilometers. Fang Xingjian was like a rocket. No, he was dashing out at a speed that far surpassed that of a rocket. Under his extreme speed, everything in the world seemed to have come to a standstill. The flying birds froze, the sand and dust froze, and the air came smashing over like cement. Fang Xingjian stabbed out with his long sword, activating the all-conquering sword. The air before him was slashed apart, creating a vacuum passageway and destroying all air resistance. With each step Fang Xingjian took, the air would explode from his stomp, shaking up everything within 100 li. Streams of air currents gushed out in all directions. Some swept up endless sand, some destroyed mountains and rocks, and some lifted up the clear skies within a 10,000 li radius. Unleashing his full power, Fang Xingjian's speed instantly reached an extreme. With a slight pause, he had already dashed over 30 kilometers away. With a few more flashes, he appeared over 50 kilometers away. Right now, the Thunder Monarch's mind was completely filled with terror. Strong, unrivaled. How can there be such a terrifying sword technique in this world? Thankfully, I managed to escape. I must leave Earth immediately. Only by escaping to Miracle World will I be able to make use of diabolic energy and shake off Fang Xingjian. The diabolic energy on Earth was too weak. It was only in Miracle World that Magic Prince warriors or mages will be able to make use of diabolic energy in battle. Just as the Thunder Monarch was thinking of this, alarm sounds rang out incessantly from the alloy armor. On the screen of the helmet, on the electronic map, a red that was catching up to him at an unimaginable speed. Chapter 508. The Thunder Monarch turned his head and saw a black dot suddenly appear in midair. He blinked, and that black dot turned into Fang Xingjian, appearing over 10 kilometers behind him. The Thunder Monarch let out an astonished cry, and over 100 laser beams shot out, hitting Fang Xingjian's body. Simultaneously, several tens of small-scale missiles shot out fiercely, smashing toward Fang Xingjian's head. However, Fang Xingjian's sword light slashed out horizontally. All of the laser beams had only heated up his body for less than 1/100th of a second when they were swept through by streams of sword light. They were split into two from the middle and reflected onto the ground, creating many huge ravines. Simultaneously, Fang Xingjian's body accelerated once again, and the 1,000,000 sword ripples swept out. All of the small-scale missiles were shattered, and he was now less than 100 meters away from the Thunder Monarch. The Thunder Monarch's countenance turned pale. However, he was a divine-level expert after all. Although he was terrified of Fang Xingjian's power, it did not affect his performance in the least in the battle. Scorching white light burst out from his body, and streams of ring-shaped lightning appeared, turning into plasma with a high temperature of several 100,000 degrees Celsius that encompassed his body. Layers of stacking plasma engulfed his body completely, and then it shrank abruptly. Then it sent out plasma spheres that smashed out toward Fang Xingjian, who was dashing toward him. At this moment, the destructive prowess that the Thunder Monarch displayed was comparable to the plasma cannons on the legendary interstellar battleships. Any of the plasma cannons sent out would be able to penetrate through any armor on Earth. The instantaneous destructive prowess within a single area could even be compared to that of a nuclear missile. Seeing the plasma spheres shooting out explosively toward him, Fang Xingjian slashed out again without even thinking, activating the light pursuit sword ripples. In an instant, over 1,000,000 sword attacks struck out, destroying the plasma spheres and the plasma within them. However, this also caused Fang Xingjian's speed to be slightly slower, and the Thunder Monarch once again widened the distance between the two of them. The two of them chased and fled just like that. Wherever they passed by, there would be thunderous explosions, and streams of laser beams, sword ripples, and plasma cannons would scatter onto the ground. They destroyed countless mountains and vaporized many lakes. The two of them were simply too fast. In the blink of an eye, they had crossed the African continent and arrived at the Asian continent. Compared to the battle with the despot, the destructive prowess of each battle between Feng Xingjian and the Thunder Monarch was smaller. However, due to their high mobility, the area of effect they had was larger. They're here. They're here. They've crossed the border. In the middle of the Eurasian continent, the Air Force command center of a certain country was in chaos. Fire all the missiles and shoot down that Feng Xingjian for me. No, it's too fast. Our missiles can't catch up at all. Damn it, the aftermath of their attack destroyed the entire Essex Air Force Base. Where is he? Where are they now? They're gone. They've already passed through our country. On the Himalayas, 3 mountaineers were slowly climbing towards the peak. However, at the next moment, 2 black lines cut across the sky, appearing and then disappearing from their line of sight. Then, under the trio's astonished gazes, streams of thunder rumbled, and several hundred light pillars cut across the sky. Countless transparent and formless sword ripples slashed onto the mountain peak, and over 100 meters of Mount Everest slopes were vaporized. One of the mountaineers looked at the incoming avalanche and bellowed, "Run!" At the foot of the mountain, countless people walked out from their cars, houses, and hotels. They looked at the doomsday-like scene with their eyes and mouths agape. They saw countless snowflakes being blasted into the sky, turning into a snowstorm driven by gusts of strong gales. Bringing along avalanches and explosions, it encompassed the entire Himalayas at extremely rapid speed. They've crossed the border. Where are they? Northwest Province? No. Their speed is too fast. They've already reached the Central Province. What kind of joke is this? Where's the Skynet? Where's the anti-missile system? We can't catch up to them. In the Joint Command Center of Xian Country and the Earth's Federation, several hundred military officers were extremely busy. One of the commanders looked at the 2 light spots that were advancing rapidly on the map and mumbled, "Is this the true destructive prowess of a divine-level expert? To think that in less than a minute, they've crossed across the entire Eurasian continent, destroyed countless mountain ranges, cities, and armies, and returned directly?" At this moment, an unprecedented feeling of dejection shrouded the hearts of everyone present. With such power, such mobility, and such destructive prowess, how were they supposed to make a move? Just then, an adjutant came up to the commander and said, "Sir, the Federation's president has already given permission for you to use nuclear missiles at the critical moment. We mustn't let Demonic City be destroyed in the hands of the 2 of them. We must stop them before they arrive." In the sky, 10,000 meters above the ground, in the blink of an eye, the Thunder Monarch and Feng Xingjian arrived in the central region of Xian Country. The 2 of them had exchanged blows for less than a minute, but the Thunder Monarch felt extremely exhausted. Regardless of whether it was laser cannons, guided missiles, plasma cannons, or even poison attacks and lightning strikes, all of them would be slashed apart by the lunatic before him with a single sword attack. The Thunder Monarch felt as if he was at the end of his rope. However, just then, 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles that were over 10 meters long flew over from the front. The speed of the intercontinental ballistic missiles was much slower than theirs. However, as they were facing the Thunder Monarch and Feng Xingjian, their relative speed was the same. Therefore, in the blink of an eye, they had already arrived next to the 2 of them. Boom! In just a few microseconds, the atmospheric pressure at the center of the nuclear explosion reached several billion times stronger than before. All the atoms in the air were stripped of their electrons, forming high-temperature and high-pressure plasma. X-rays, beta rays, alpha rays, and all sorts of light radiations burst out explosively. A fireball with a diameter of over 50 kilometers was born in the sky, just like a second sun in the sky. At this moment, within a range of over 1,000 kilometers, almost everyone in Xian Country could witness this bright light in the sky. At the center of the shock waves, Tyrant, who was outside Feng Xingjian's skin, received the first round of impact. Then, like an onion that had its layers peeled off, Over 70% of Tyron's body tissues were vaporized completely within a short thousandth of a second. The high-temperature and high-pressure plasma shock waves, which were mixed with all sorts of light radiations, struck Fang Xingjian's body. At this moment, Fang Xingjian only felt that every bit of flesh and blood throughout his body was dying, and every single cell was withering. If he did not put up any resistance, his physical body would truly turn into dust in the next hundredth of a second. However, as a physical structure, the physical body was dying. The physical particles that formed the physical structure, which were even smaller than cells, were going through a different metamorphosis at this moment. Fang Xingjian relied on his martial will, which was so powerful that he could survive for one day and one night even after his physical body died. In the process of his physical body ceaselessly dying out, he sensed the changes in the 1.08 billion physical particles in his body. He could sense that the physical particles in his body were exploding one after another under the impact of the nuclear explosion. They were like candles, and countless candles lit up under the impact of the nuclear explosion in his originally dim body. It was as if countless worlds were shattering in Fang Xingjian's body. Under the impact of the nuclear explosion, over 100 physical particles stirred. Chapter 509. This feeling? The physical particles in my body are incessantly being stimulated. However, sensing that his physical body and brain were about to break down, Fang Xingjian did not linger on this feeling any longer. He swung his long sword repeatedly, sweeping away the high-temperature shock waves in the surroundings. Then he darted into the spatial gaps with the Thunder Monarch. In Demonic City, in the joint command center of Xian Country and the Federation, everyone was extremely nervous. The Zhongxi province has sensed an intense tremor. All electronic communications in the entire Zhongyuan province have been destroyed. We probably won't be able to recover within 48 hours. There's a fire in the Zhongnan province. The mushroom cloud formed by the explosion has already exceeded 100 kilometers and is still expanding. The smoke and dust are still moving. The satellites are unable to find traces of Fang Xingjian. Is he dead? He should be. That's 3 nuclear bombs with a yield of 50 million. The explosion this time around will probably have an irreversible effect on the entire Earth's magnetic field, environment, and atmospheric circulation. Hold on. Just then, a tremendous tremor rang out from the top of the command center. Countless amounts of mud and dust came down, as if something heavy had fallen from the sky. What's going on? Who's attacking? Show the surveillance footage to the big screen. In the surveillance footage, Fang Xingjian stood alone on the armor plate on the ground. He grabbed onto the Thunder Monarch, who was covered in blood and had been badly mutilated from the explosions, with one hand. Fang Xingjian's other hand held onto the white bone longsword. With a thrust, the white bone longsword pierced through the entire armor plate and once again headed deeper into the underground base. Damn it! Why is he charging over? Everyone, be on the highest alert. Everyone, be on the highest alert. Warning, this is not an act. I repeat, this is not an act. With a loud boom, the wall, which the sound had come from, was blasted apart. Fang Xingjian walked out slowly and saw over 100 mechanical soldiers starting to shoot at him. As the alarm in the entire command center rang out, countless troops took action. In the darkness, the densely packed mechanical soldiers trembled fiercely. At the next moment, many blood-red eyes lit up in the darkness. There seemed to be several 10,000 of them. One gate after another fell down. Poisonous gas, flames, and electricity filled every inch of space in front of Fang Xingjian. With a sweep of the sword, millions of sword ripples were formed, and countless robots were slashed into pieces. The poisonous gas was swept away, and the gates were blasted apart. The base's full defense was unable to stop Fang Xingjian for even a second. Damn it! He's coming. West Sector 3 has been completely destroyed. The 1st, 3rd, and 6th units have all been wiped out. All robots have been wiped out. The 32nd armor layer has been breached. The reinforcements will only arrive in 10 minutes. The target is still advancing. The target is advancing towards the final barrier. Force field shield activated. It's been destroyed. To think that a single attack could do so much damage. Fang Xingjian walked forward step by step. Faced with the surging metal storm, his light pursuit sword ripples were like many precise laser attacks, slashing through several 10,000 metal bullets. Following this, rocket launchers, machine guns, and poisonous gas bombs came surging out from the metal walls. However, each time one of them surged out, it would be destroyed by Fang Xingjian's light pursuit sword ripples. The target is broken through the 52nd underground level. The third robot troop has been completely wiped out. The 52nd underground level has completely collapsed. Casualties unknown. Damn it, where's the reinforcements? Where's the reinforcements? The target has reached the final barrier. To be able to destroy the 30-meter-thick final barrier with just a single sword attack. Such destructive prowess. He's coming over. In the command center, the commander-in-chief looked at the metal armor above his head and slowly closed his eyes. At the next moment, streams of light shot out from the armor layer. With a boom, the entire armor layer was sliced into pieces, and Fang Xingjian dragged the Thunder Monarch and descended slowly. Sword intense swept out, and Fang Xingjian's voice rang out in the minds of the Federation's and Xian countries' military higher-ups. From today onward, you guys control Earth's future, and I control your life and death. In the Sahara Desert, the lower half of Li Shuanghua's body had been buried by sand and dust. However, she was unable to move her body at all. Her powers had been depleted to an extreme in the earlier battle with Fang Xingjian. She was already at her limit, not even fainting, let alone being able to move. Amidst the sand and dust, a soft bellow rang out, and the sandstorm was blown away. Fang Xingjian slowly descended from the sky and arrived before Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua looked at Fang Xingjian and said coldly, "Why, Valspawn? Are you here to kill me?" Fang Xingjian said calmly, "You've been wanting to kill me, your maternal grandson. But now, as long as you admit your mistakes to me, kneel down, apologize to my mother, and repent, I won't kill you. Are you unwilling as well?" Li Shuanghua closed her eyes. It was as if she could not be bothered to continue talking to Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian continued, "Do you think that the Earth Federation, the other 5 great countries, or other divine-level experts will be able to save you?" Li Shuanghua opened her eyes, looked at Fang Xingjian, and said, "Do you think that you'll be able to suppress the world single-handedly?" What a joke. I've just left for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. I've already defeated the Thunder Monarch and the Despot and made a trip to the Joint Command Center of Xian Country and the Earth Federation. They've already agreed to let me take your place and become the new director of the Earth Federation. The corners of Li Shuanghua's lips curled up, and her eyes were filled with mockery. "Do you think that I'll believe such childish lies?" Fang Xingjian shook his head. "Li Shuanghua, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Today, I'll cripple your cultivation first. We'll have plenty of time to slowly talk. I'll definitely make you lower your head." Fang Xingjian tapped out with his sword, and the infiltrating void sword exploded in Li Shuanghua's brain. It pierced into her cerebellum and a few nerves in her brain, cutting off Li Shuanghua's ability to control her physical body. In that instant, Li Shuanghua felt that the powers in her body had started to dissipate. Due to the decrease in her control over her physical body, she was unable to integrate the powers of her muscles and bones. As time went on, her physical body would become increasingly weaker without any training, becoming closer and closer to that of an ordinary person. However, what was even more fatal was Li Shuanghua's consciousness. From this day onward, as long as she focused, she would feel an intense pain in her brain as if she was being pricked by needles. She would no longer be able to activate her martial will, reassemble her physical body, attack, or cultivate. In the day that followed, the entire world's upper echelon was met with an unprecedented storm. The first to be affected was the Fang clan. With Li Shuanghua, the Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, and his wife, Hua Mimi, in the lead, several hundred people from the Fang clan were locked up in Demonic City's prison. The second son, Fang Yueha, had a meteoric rise. He became the Fang clan's representative and was in charge of all matters regarding the Fang clan. Chapter 510. 3 days had passed since that world-shaking battle. With Fang Xingjian's unrivaled sword arts, the entire Fang clan submitted to him. The second son of the Fang clan, Fang Yueha, also started to carry out drastic reforms. He either chased out the old people and those who were loyal to Li Shuanghua in the past, or sent them to prison, bringing the Fang clan under his control completely. As one of the 5 great clans on Earth, the Fang clan's influence far surpassed the imagination of ordinary people. They had great influence in the areas of medicine, finance, real estate, food, industry, military, and politics. Even if Fang Yueha were to accept all of them, make adjustments, and carry out reforms, it would take him 1 or even 2 years. However, all of this had nothing to do with Fang Xingjian. He only existed as the Fang clan's clan head, and Fang Yueha was the one who carried out the actual tasks. In fact, putting aside power, Fang Xingjian was merely an 18-year-old young man. He could single-handedly kill thousands or even tens of thousands of Fang Yueha. However, in terms of management, finance, law, and many other aspects, he was no match for Fang Yueha, who had been managing the clan for many years. Moreover, he knew that his greatest reliance was his power. Wasting his cultivation time to manage the clan and develop influence would be neglecting the essentials. For the past few days, he stayed at the top floor of the Fang clan's building, condensing his specialties while comprehending what he had gained from the battle. This time around, the battle with the 3 divine-level experts had allowed Fang Xingjian to have a new comprehension of his sword arts. Defeating Li Shuanghua and suppressing the Federation had made him feel great, and his hatred had been greatly reduced. His mental cultivation method had finally attained a breakthrough to level 9. Furthermore, when he had encountered the nuclear explosion at the end, it had given him a new idea of condensing physical particles. Right now, Tyrant had already turned into a young boy, sitting at the side with a displeased expression. He looked at Fang Xingjian and said, "Hello? When are we going back? The ether particle density or diabolic energy here is too little. I'll only be able to recover when we return to Miracle World." In a battle 3 days ago, due to the nuclear bomb, over 90% of Tyrant's body had been vaporized. Moreover, he had lent a lot of energy to Fang Xingjian along the way, causing his recovery speed to be extremely slow. He would need to return to Miracle World to replenish his energy before he could fully recover. Fang Xingjian said, "Let's talk about it after I finish everything here. Maybe there's another way." Just then, Fang Yueha walked in. When he saw Fang Xingjian, he said, "Xingjian, Caroline has been brought here. 3 days ago, she received news of your great victory and immediately tried to escape into Miracle World. However, she was arrested by the Navy on the spot. Caroline, the black woman of the Onassis family that Despot belonged to. 2 years ago, he had kidnapped Fang Xingjian and tortured Fang Xingjian. Now, without Fang Xingjian needing to make a move, the Onassis family had directly captured Caroline, as well as countless members of her family, including Caroline's parents, younger siblings, and hundreds of subordinates, servants, and relatives. Within 3 days, blood flowed like a river. Over 1/3 of the Onassis family's direct descendants were killed in one go. The Onassis family then transferred over several tens of trillions worth of wealth to the Fang clan, which was equivalent to the annual GDP of some countries. Similarly, due to the Thunder Monarch's failure, the Ford clan had also sacrificed countless companies, organizations, and technological research results. They could be said to have suffered a great loss. However, there was no other way. The divine-level experts of both their clans were now in Fang Xingjian's hands, and they had no choice but to give in. "Caroline?" Fang Xingjian said calmly. "Bring her in for us to take a look." A few minutes later, A black man who was covered in a bloody mess and seemed to be on his last breath from the torture was dragged over by the guards and thrown onto the ground. Carolyn lifted her head and glared at Feng Xingjian with a pair of eyes filled with hatred. Feng Xingjian, the thing I regret the most right now is that I didn't chop off your head back then. Feng Xingjian looked at Carolyn. The latter had already become a level 29 Magic Prince warrior. However, the female expert who had been high and mighty in the past was now so weak that she could not even withstand a single blow. Tyrant, eat her. Before Carolyn could react, a black shadow had already pounced onto her. It was like a lump of plasticine, gradually wrapping around her and starting to digest her. Tyrant had been craving for this for a very long time. If it was not because Feng Xingjian had been keeping an eye on him, he would have long since started to engulf living creatures to replenish the depletion of his physical body. Carolyn struggled crazily, her expression filled with extreme terror. She kept on crying out agonizingly and begging for mercy. There were not many people who could watch as their bodies were engulfed like this. Leaving Carolyn to cry out agonizingly at the side, Feng Xingjian then looked at Feng Yuehe and asked, "Has the Federation approved of the nuclear missiles?" The previous time Feng Xingjian had experienced a nuclear explosion, it had helped him to explode and stimulate over 100 physical particles. This had greatly increased his interest in nuclear missiles, and he planned to try out nuclear missiles or even radiation to see if they could be used to accelerate the rate at which he condensed physical particles. Chapter 511. Feng Xingjian. Do you think that I'm a 3-year-old kid? If you want me to kneel down and apologize, you won't kill me. If you want to break down my martial will and humiliate me, you should at least tell a reliable lie. Now that things have come to this, it's either one of us who dies. If you want to kill me, then kill me. If you want to humiliate me, then don't even think about it. Li Shuanghua then looked at Feng Yuehe and said coldly, "Unfilial son, are you going to help the evildoer as well?" Feng Yuehe lowered his head and said calmly, "Mother, ever since you became the clan head, you've been acting recklessly, going against the grain, appointing people through favoritism, and only knowing how to give all the good stuff to Third Brother's family. Do you think that everyone will really submit to you? If it wasn't for the fact that you're powerful and a divine-level expert, everyone would have long since overthrown you." Li Shuanghua looked at Feng Yuehe, and hints of fury flashed in her eyes. Fine. Remember what you've said today. When I recover my powers and take control of the Feng clan again, the first thing I'll do is kill you, an unfilial son. Mother, just admit defeat, Feng Yuehe said calmly. The outcome has been decided. Xingjian's sword arts have shaken the world. You don't stand a chance. Li Shuanghua merely smiled coldly, not believing what Feng Yuehe had said. Therefore, the Feng clan's second son, Feng Yuehe, said, "Mr. Thunder Monarch, Mr. Despot, please come in for a while. Also, bring third brother and sister-in-law in." The silver-haired Thunder Monarch and the Despot, who had shrunk to a height of over 2 meters, walked in slowly. Right now, the two of them did not appear to have any aura or spirit, just like ordinary people. Clearly, their cultivations had also been crippled by Feng Xingjian. They were unable to activate the power of their physical bodies, unleash the prowess of their martial wills, or perform any extraordinary powers. Furthermore, they had been seriously injured by Feng Xingjian previously, and their extraordinary powers were immediately crippled. This caused them to be unable to recover from their injuries, and they were constantly in a state of being seriously injured. If it was not because Feng Xingjian had treated their fatal injuries, their physical bodies might have died completely. At the sight of this scene, Li Shuanghua's eyes narrowed like a cat's as she stared at the two divine-level experts before her, as if unable to believe all of this. After that, the Feng clan's third son, Feng Yueming, and Hua Mimi also walked in wearing prisoners' clothes. When they saw Li Shuanghua, who had become a prisoner, intense despair flashed in their eyes. When they looked at Feng Xingjian, their hearts were filled with hatred, fury, despair, and bewilderment. Even their greatest support, Li Shuanghua, had lost to Fang Xingjian, leaving them at a loss and in despair about their future. Fang Yuehe continued. The Thunder Monarch and Mr. Despicable were both suppressed by Xingjian. Right now, their cultivations have been crippled and they are temporarily staying at the Fang clan as guests. Hearing this, Li Shuanghua's countenance changed slightly, and the countenances of Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi changed drastically. The despair in their eyes grew even stronger, and they started to look at Fang Xingjian with a pitiful and pleading gaze. Fang Xingjian could sense that with the appearance of the Thunder Monarch and Despicable, Li Shuanghua's will was clearly shaken. Although she did not seem to have changed, she was actually very shocked by the Thunder Monarch and Despicable's defeats. Fang Xingjian looked at Li Shuanghua and said, Thunder Monarch, Despicable, if you're willing to fully support me and Fang Yuehe and the Earth Federation in the future, it's not that I can't let you guys go. I can even consider removing the sword intent restrictions on you guys. What? Are you serious? Both the Thunder Monarch and Despicable lifted their heads and looked at Fang Xingjian in disbelief. If the two of them were in Fang Xingjian's shoes, there was no way they would let them go so easily after having defeated two divine-level experts after so much difficulty. The Thunder Monarch frowned and said, Aren't you afraid that we'll continue to make an enemy out of you after we recover our cultivation? Fang Xingjian said calmly, With my sword arts, it'll only take a single thought for me to kill the two of you. So what if I recover your cultivation? Even if you were to attain another breakthrough, it'll be as easy as flipping my hand for me to kill the two of you. If you don't believe me, you can give it a try after you've recovered your cultivation. Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, the two of them closed their brows and sank into deep thought for a moment. The Despicable was the first to be unable to take it. Having gotten used to violence and the Despicable's powerful physical body, the Despicable was not used to feeling weak for 3 consecutive days. After all, his power came from his physical body and spirit, which were the most fundamental things. How uncomfortable was he to be crippled now? How uncomfortable was he? Out of the 3 divine-level experts present, the Despicable was the one who relied the most on his physical body. This was only because divine-level experts had strong wills. If it had been anyone else, they would probably have committed suicide directly. Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, the Despicable said directly, Fang Xingjian, the conflict between us is just over Carolyn. Her entire branch has been wiped out, and we've handed her over to you. Therefore, the conflict between us isn't really considered much of a conflict. As long as you recover my cultivation, from today onward, the entire Onassis clan and I will treat you as our leader. Of course, the Despicable's words contained both truth and falsehood. Since he had come to Fang Xingjian's side, it was impossible for his loyalty to be too high. If the situation was favorable, he might even rebel. After all, which one of the divine-level experts did not have many fortuitous encounters and great talent? Which one of them did not see themselves as the center of the world? However, after Despot finished speaking, Fang Xingjian only nodded. That makes sense. Then, he glanced sideways at Despot and said, But who told you to stand and talk to me? After Fang Xingjian said this, Despot's face suddenly turned red and his eyes became bloodshot. He said, You want me to kneel to you? Aren't you going to respect me? Fang Xingjian waved his hand, and a burst of power erupted from his hands. He compressed the air and turned it into layers of heavy pressure that pressed down on Despot's body, causing him to slowly kneel on the ground. Looking at Despot's bloodshot eyes and extremely ferocious face, Fang Xingjian said indifferently, You're not convinced? Despot lowered his head. He was afraid that if he were to raise his head, the killing intent in his eyes would be too obvious. He clenched his fists tightly and bellowed, That's enough, Fang Xingjian. From today onward, the entire Onassis clan will respect you. My entire clan, and I will become the Fang clan's vassals. Accompanied by his actions and words, his eyes suddenly dimmed, and the martial will in his mind continued to shatter. Such humiliation was a severe blow to the condensed martial will of a divine-level expert. Despot said in an extremely dispirited manner, "I'm convinced." Fang Xingjian nodded and tapped out with a sword finger. He took away the sword intent restrictions on Despot's body and healed the damage to his brain. Despot clutched his head and let out an agonizing cry. However, he got up very quickly, and the black magic prints all over his body continued to spread out. His vital energy and blood circulated, and his tendons, bones, and muscles started to stretch. He had already started to recover from his injuries and regain his strength. In just 1 or 2 hours, he would probably be able to recover more than half of his battle prowess. Chapter 512. His power had finally returned. Sensing his strong physical body and the seething power that kept on growing in his body, the despot broke into an excited smile. However, at the next moment, Fang Xingjian shook his head and said, "My power has recovered. Now, we can settle another score." "What?" The despot looked at Fang Xingjian, puzzled. "I've received news that your clan's butler said that if you ask Li Shuanghua to join forces with you, you'll have to hand over half of my mother's corpse. Are you the one who said this?" Fang Xingjian's gaze was like sharp sword light, encompassing the despot's body. At this moment, his killing aura seemed to have materialized, encompassing the despot entirely. Hearing this, the despot knew that the situation was not good. He stood up abruptly, wanting to escape with all his might. Black magic prints flashed explosively, turning into surges of materialized power that smashed onto Fang Xingjian's body. Simultaneously, the despot retreated abruptly, wanting to escape. However, he was not a match for Fang Xingjian even at his peak condition, let alone now, when he had just started to recover. When the despot's martial will struck onto Fang Xingjian's body, it was blocked by the Heaven's Volition sword intent. Fang Xingjian did not even waver. Simultaneously, the despot's physical body had just taken a step back when he was struck by Fang Xingjian's palm across space. His flesh and blood shattered, and he was smashed into the metal wall like a meatball. The despot's entire body was distorted, and his eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Fang Xingjian. He said, "Fang Xingjian, going back on your words and doing whatever you want won't end well." Fang Xingjian smiled. "This is what you call doing whatever I want?" He shook his wrist and tossed Tyrant toward the despot, saying, "Tyrant, let him know what it means to do whatever you want." Looking at this divine-level expert's body, Tyrant was extremely excited. Although the other party's vital energy and blood had deteriorated severely, he still had the qualities of a divine-level expert. After engulfing this body, his physical strength would definitely increase once again. In the next moment, the entire prison cell was filled with screams, chewing sounds, and all sorts of sounds of bones and flesh being crushed. Looking at the brutal scene before them, Fang Yuehe, Fang Yueming, and Huang Mimi all wore horrified expressions. A hint of pity also flashed in the Thunder Monarch's eyes. Li Shuanghua was the only one who remained expressionless from the very beginning. It was as if nothing could shake her soul. Immediately after, Fang Xingjian looked toward the Thunder Monarch. The Thunder Monarch felt an incomparably heavy pressure in his heart when his gaze swept past him. The brutal and tragic scene seemed to be imprinted in his mind, and he would never be able to get rid of it. Various conflicting emotions flashed in the Thunder Monarch's heart. Finally, he sighed. The Thunder Monarch also revealed a helpless expression as he said to Fang Xingjian, "Fang Xingjian, if I were to acknowledge you as my master, would you deal with me like how you dealt with Despot?" Fang Xingjian shook his head. "There's actually no great enmity between us, and I don't have any opinions about you either. If you're willing to submit to me, I'll naturally let you off." Hearing Fang Xingjian's reply, the Thunder Monarch nodded and said, "All right then. Fang Xingjian, as long as you recover my cultivation, from today onward, I'll advance and retreat together with you in the Federation and acknowledge you as my master." Divine-level powers were extremely rare, and they had gone through a lot of hard work to attain them. So what if they just submitted slightly to Fang Xingjian? They were not like Li Shuanghua or Despot, who had many conflicts with Fang Xingjian and were unable to lower their heads. Moreover, looking at Despot's miserable state, the Thunder Monarch could not bring himself to reject him. Thinking of how he would have to watch himself being eaten up bit by that monster, even the Thunder Monarch felt his hair stand up. Hearing the Thunder Monarch's words, Li Shuanghua lifted her head abruptly. "Are you crazy? You're going to submit to this vile spawn just like that? When Tian Dao and the others return, or when the Mage Association finds out about the situation here, do you think that you'll be in for a good time?" The other two divine-level experts in the Federation, Tian Dao and Titan, had been in Miracle World all this while and had not returned. The Fang clan's Fang Xingqian was the Mage Association's Black Mage King's disciple and had many connections with the Fang clan and the Shuanghua. The Thunder Monarch smiled bitterly and said, "Even if the Black Mage King comes to Demonic City, he won't be able to perform much black magic. As for Tian Dao and the others, even if they attain another breakthrough, they won't be a match for Xingjian right now. Old lady, why can't you understand? With Fang Xingjian's current cultivation, it's enough for him to take the world by storm and become the strongest on Earth. Why must you still be so stubborn?" Fang Yueha also said, "That's right. Xingjian's sword arts are unrivaled in the world right now. Moreover, how long has it been since he started cultivating? Not only is he the leader of our Fang clan, but he's also the hope of our Earth in the future. With him around, we won't be at a disadvantage when we talk to the Mage Association or even the other divine-level experts in Miracle World in the future. Just give in. Damn it. Xingjian becoming the strongest on Earth and becoming the Federation's pillar of support is already a trend. Why must you still be so stubborn?" Fang Xingjian smiled and pierced out with the infiltrating void, removing the sword intent restrictions on the Thunder Monarch. The moment the sword intent restrictions were removed, the Thunder Monarch started to activate the martial will in his body. Electricity flashed on his body, and he started to recover his physical body and battle prowess. His face was filled with joy. Li Shuanghua looked at the Thunder Monarch, who had recovered his powers, and smiled coldly. "For you to lower your head so easily means that your will isn't pure. This means that you've left behind flaws in your heart, and you no longer have the spirit to press forward with an indomitable spirit. Even if you recover your powers now, you won't have any hopes of reaching a higher level in the future. It might seem easy, but in reality, you're just cutting off your own future. You're really ignorant and laughable." A hint of a cold smile flashed on the Thunder Monarch's face as he said, "Li Shuanghua, why are you still being so stubborn? Moreover, my ideals are different from egomaniacs like you. In my opinion, the path of martial arts requires one to be flexible, to be able to endure all sorts of setbacks, failures, and to admit one's weakness. This is what it means to have a strong will. If one is unable to even admit a little bit of failure and still wants to leave behind flaws after admitting defeat, then that kind of will is what it means to be truly weak. To be indomitable despite all setbacks and to not regret even 9 deaths. Do you really understand the meaning of these 2 sentences?" Fang Yueha continued, "Mother, just admit defeat. After all, no matter what you say, it's useless. It's because no matter what you say, we can easily kill you right now. You don't even have the right to escape. This is the reality of things. Or do you think that the Black Mage King or Fang Xingqian will be able to save you? With Xingjian's current battle prowess, as long as he comes to Demonic City, the Black Mage King won't be able to borrow the powers of the evil gods, and it'll be impossible for him to win. As for Fang Xingqian, why don't you open your eyes wide and take a look at Xingjian's current cultivation? Fang Xingqian's talent can't even be compared to Xingjian's. Do you still not understand?" Li Shuanghua did not say a word and remained expressionless. It was as if she could not be bothered to continue arguing with everyone, yet it was also as if nothing would be able to change her mind. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.